Coming up, Will from Exploding Helicopters back on. We'll be looking at Equalizer 2000, starring Richard Norton and directed by Cirio H. Santiago. So stay tuned for that. Next week, Ty from Quabbins is back on for his monthly hit. We'll be looking at Final Kill, movie directed by the guy who did Hunting Games and Most Dangerous Game. So two that we've done on our podcast before. It's starring Billy Zane and Randy Couture, but like small parts, right? That kind of thing. So that'll be the one movie we'll do. The second movie we'll be looking at is Bloodline Killer with Tyrese Gibson. So stay tuned for that. That'll be next week. In 2 weeks' time, Scott Murphy from All 90s Action All the Time is back on. We'll be looking at Flight of Fury. So if you remember, that was the movie that ripped off Black Thunder, the Michael Dudikoff film, but also it was directed by Michael Koish, who he did 3 movies with Seagal between 06 and 07, kind of right in a row. Shadow Man, Attack Force, and Flight of Fury. So we've already done Shadow Man and Attack Force, so then Flight of Fury will be in 2 weeks' time. In terms of DTVC Extra, this Thursday I'll be doing a bonus looking at Deadpool and Wolverine. So it'll just be a kind of a short, like 30-minute kind of, one-off that we'll be doing there. And then in 2 weeks, or not this Thursday, not this Thursday, but next Thursday kind of deal. Yeah, I guess in roughly 2 weeks anyway. Superman, we'll be looking at starting with our Superman look. So that'll be Superman 1, Superman 2. One of the things I realized is I'm going to be out of town. So on Thursday the 15th, I'm going to New York to watch a Mets game. And then the 16th through the 19th, I'll be in New England visiting family. So I realized that I'm not going to be. I'm going to figure out how I'm going to get that DTVC Extra published, because I don't know if when I'll have time to record it. I'll have to figure that out. So still kind of working out the details for that, but hopefully we'll get that thing in on time. What is that going to be? The 15th is when the plan is for that one. So hopefully we will do that. Then on the site, we did the new Roadhouse last weekend. Roadhouse, I guess, call it Roadhouse 2024. So that's what we did last weekend. I think this week we're going to kind of stick with what we've got on Letterboxd and go with Ruthless, the Art Camacho directed film starring Dermot Mulroney that Ty and I did on a previous podcast episode, our Dermot double feature episode we did. So I'll do that one. And I think that's kind of, after that, I've got a Chuck Steele, Night of the Trampires listed on Letterboxd. That was one we didn't do for this podcast, but we did on Will's Exploding Helicopter podcast. So I think, again, probably stick with that, because that one I've got all the images for it as well, because I watched it. I think I rented it on Amazon Prime, took the images so I'd have it for the review. So I know I'm still kind of working my way, or still doing ones that have been on previous podcast episodes. Looking to kind of get some new stuff, because I'm actually starting to exhaust the previous podcast episode ones too, right? Unless we kind of dig into those ones that I did with Ty, where there's a ton of those, right, that I haven't reviewed yet. But yeah, so I need to start watching some new stuff and that isn't on the podcast. So hopefully I'll kind of get that soon. I do have some stuff in my watch list that I need to take care of. So it's not all just reviewing movies that were ones that I did on a podcast episode. So I'm going to try to do that. But again, I've been busy with some other stuff, and so it's been easier just to write those ones because I've already watched them, right? And I've kind of, they're fresh in my mind from doing podcast episodes on them. So there's that sense there too, that like, okay, it's easy to just pop on the computer and write the review than to watch something new. But I do need to watch something for sure. So we'll kind of see. Keep it on the Letterboxd, because if I do watch something, I'll insert it in there before either Chuck Steele, Night of the Trampires, also Electric Boogaloo, the Canon Films one. I think that's another one I've got in the hopper to review, listed on the Letterboxd. So again, that was a recent podcast episode too. So we'll see what happens there. And then in terms of things that I've done for other podcasts, other sites, that episode of After Movie Diner, the Sleazy Spader Springtime one where we looked at Shadow of Fear, that one is up on the main podcast feed. So for people that aren't Patreon subscribers, that's available now. When I listened to it, I listened back to it myself. John cut a huge chunk of our kind of tangent conversation. I think we went on a huge tangent about writing and TV show writing and that kind of thing, and he cut a big chunk of it. So the episode itself is actually only about 2.5 hours. And he mentions in the episode that he cuts that huge chunk out there. Now, I don't know if you're a Patreon subscriber, if you're watching the video feed, if you got the whole thing or not. But yeah, so it's a little bit more of a manageable size. So something I've never really done before. I've thought about that, but I've never I've never when we go on tangents, when we kind of do the big tangent kind of thing, I kind of just leave them in. I think probably one of the more infamous ones was when Scott Murphy. I think one of the first times he was on, we did about an hour on World Cup soccer, and then when I released the episode, he listened. He was like, "Wow, you really left that hour in about World Cup soccer." That like it was like. I released the episode after the World Cup was done, I think. So it wasn't even like relevant at that time. And he was right. I probably should have cut it. I probably should have dumped it all out there. But I don't really. I generally only cut like, when the person, the guest, or if it's myself that, something drops, like the connection drops or somebody needs to go out or something like that. But I probably do need to get better at editing, and cutting things out, that kind of thing. So, but anyway, just letting you know that episode that I did with him, we had a big long conversation, but he pared it down to about 2.5 hours. But yeah, if you're not subscribed to After Movie Diner, you should be. If I can say it, I don't know if I can say it, but After Movie Diner, you should be subscribed. You probably are. I would imagine, if you're subscribed to us, that you are to that as well. But you can hear me on there too. And then for the opening thought, I don't have a big opening thought just because I'll be doing that solo, or they'll be doing that kind of special DTVC extra on Deadpool and Wolverine later this week. Also, part of what I wanted this opening thought to be is about the movie theater experience. And on the recent episode of the DTVC podcast that I did, Undefeatable with Freddie Young of Full Moon Reviews, we get into more about the movie theater experience, kind of what that's like nowadays. But one of the interesting things I noticed, so I went on a Sunday morning matinee. It was a 10:15 a.m. Matinee for Deadpool and Wolverine. The thinking was I could just get it out of the way, which doesn't sound like a great thing. I mean, I really enjoyed the movie. Kind of just, spoiler alert for what I'm going to be talking about on Thursday. But it was one of those deals where it was like I knew 10:15 was going to be a good a period where if I watched it then I could get done and get, run some errands and things like that and still have the rest of my day. That was also the earliest possible one. And actually, I got to sleep late Saturday night. And so there was a part of me that was like, I don't know if I'm going to make the 10:15 matinee. I think I woke up around 8-ish. And so full disclosure, I have a cat. Well, we have a cat. My wife and I have a cat who he wakes me up at 1 a.m. to eat. That's kind of his deal. And he's very persistent about it. He's asleep next to me here. He's relaxed. But at the time I'm recording this, it's close to his evening feed time. So he's going to be up and asking about that pretty soon. But he usually starts in early, and yeah, he just kind of goes. And so once I finally kind of feed him and I get back to sleep around 1:32-ish, it's like, okay, 6 hours of sleep roughly. I think I woke up around 8-ish and it was like, do I feel like, do I want to get ready and go to a movie in an hour or so? Because, it takes take me about a half hour to get to the movie theater, taking the subway and walking from the subway to where the theater is. But it was one of those things where I was up and eventually I was like, okay, actually I can still make this movie. And so, I got there, and actually for a 10:15 a.m. matinee, it actually was about a quarter full, which I wasn't expecting. So that gives you a sense of how popular Deadpool versus Wolverine, or Deadpool and Wolverine, has been, that a 10:15 a.m. on a Sunday matinee actually, was about a quarter full. And so there's that piece there. But, I don't go to a lot of movies, right? This is 2 this year for me. I think last year I went to 3. So that's actually been a lot for me recently. And that's kind of the pace I'm kind of keeping at, is maybe 2 to 3 a year. That's probably what I'll do. I don't know if I'm going to see anything else this year. One of the things I'm thinking about after seeing Madam Web, I'm kind of intrigued by that whole Spider-Man without Spider-Man Spider-Verse, the Sans Spider-Verse is what you could call it, right? Maybe the Sans Spider-Man Spider-Verse, whatever it is. But I'm kind of curious about that. And so I know there's Venom in the Venom sequel, and then they're doing the third one this year. They actually had a trailer for it when I got to Deadpool and Wolverine. I am kind of curious about that, and so if I get around to watching those, that might be the movie that I see in the theater. I can't think of anything else that's coming out that I necessarily want to see in the theater this year. I know the new Captain America with Anthony Mackie. I feel like that's one. I think that's coming out in February. I feel like that's one I've got to support by going to the theater and seeing it, because I really like the idea of Anthony Mackie, taking over the mantle of Captain America. And in the trailer, there's a really great scene where, Harrison Ford as Thunderbolt Ross says something along the lines you're no Steve Rogers. And he's like, that's right, I'm not, meaning yeah, I'm different. I do my own thing. So that might be, if I do get to the Venom movie, that the next one would be that one. So it's like 3 movies a year. But since I've been going back to the theater, because I used to not do 3 a year, right? I used to do, like, if I did 1, that was a big deal. I started going again to the movie theater recently. I think it was like 2019. My friend Ian, who lives from college, who lives here in the area, we went and saw. You've heard plenty of times about my trip to go see Lawrence of Arabia. That was my first time seeing a movie in like 5 or 6 years, I think, in the theater. And then we saw the Star Trek, the motion picture with a couple other friends at that same theater. And that theater is closed now. You can't go see movies there anymore. So that was kind of gotten me back into like the feeling of going to movies, getting my popcorn, getting my soda, and kind of sitting there. Of course, those seats were not great seats. Like, where I go to see a movie normally is the AMC dine-in at this area called the Fashion District, which the Fashion District is the modern sanitized version of this old mall called the Gallery that used to be in Philadelphia, which had tons of character and was a really fantastic might not be the best way to describe it. I think if there are people from Philadelphia who grew up in Philadelphia listening to me talk about this, they probably have a lot of difficult memories of the Gallery and don't find it as fun. But I think taking a walk through the Fashion District, you probably love the Gallery. But one of the things about it is that they have the AMC there, and it's easier for me to get to. I can take the subway, and it's like, I think it's like a few blocks from the subway. They have nice seats there. They've got the Coke freestyle sodas and the popcorns and stuff, and so it's nice. I can kind of camp myself in a seat. Of course, also you pick your seat, which is, I'm used to the theater experience where you buy your ticket and you find a seat wherever you can, and that's where you're sitting. So this whole idea of a recliner, of a cushiony seat, of a lot of leg room. That's another piece, right? Is that like I'm used to my knees hurting by the end of a movie, right? And I'm not used to this feeling now, where other than my bladder, I'm actually in pretty good shape and I'm pretty well relaxed. But it's kind of a thing that I've been enjoying. For the few times that I see a movie in the theater, I kind of like this new theater experience. Now, one of the things, of course, I talked about with Freddie, when he was on, was, part of the issue with the theater going experience is people, right? Modern moviegoers are a pain in the ass. Now, when you do a Sunday or Saturday or Sunday morning matinee, you don't deal with people, right? There aren't any people like I said, it was a quarter full for Deadpool Wolverine. That was the fullest a theater has been, since I've been going, recently. Like, I think when I saw Fast X at a Saturday, it was like 11 a.m. matinee. There was like a few people kind of scattered throughout. That was probably the most full a movie's been since this one. The Marvels, actually, it was like a matinee. It was like a midweek, because I was off for the week when I saw that one. And of course, the Expendables, no one was going to see that thing on a Saturday morning matinee. So I had the theater to myself. So I don't deal with people there. But, I guess like cell phone use in particular has been really bad. And I think one of the things that may contribute to that is, I think younger people, they're so used to having their phones on that I don't think they realize how bad it is that when they use their cell phone in the movie theater, even if they're not talking on the phone, if they're looking something up or something, that glare can be really, really disruptive to the person watching the movie. Like, if you see that light in the peripheral. I remember my friend and I, when we saw Lawrence of Arabia, the emergency exit was completely lit up to the right of our eyesight, our eye line, and that really made watching that difficult. I think it was part of the reason why that was the case, is that was a theater people didn't use that much, right? So it was like, all right, we're going to stick Lawrence of Arabia in that theater with the obnoxious emergency exit kind of thing. But anyway, maybe I'll start going to see more movies, but I'm wondering too, because I used to be a huge fan of going to the movie theater to see movies. That used to be, I remember, in the 90s and 2000s going to a lot of movies. And since I've gotten older, it's not as big of a thing for me. I think I could probably count, like, maybe on one hand or two hands, maybe, how many movies I've seen since I moved down here to Philadelphia. It's not a lot. And I think part of it for me is, it just the theater experience just seems to be a lot of work, when it's like, it's easier for me to just pop on my phone or tablet or the actual TV screen, right, and just watch the movie that way. But it is kind of nice as like a treat, as like every once in a while I'm going to go to the movies and go see a movie in the theater, which I know for me doing this site, I guess as a direct-to-video connoisseur, I guess it's okay that I don't go to the movie theaters that often, because I know a lot of other people that I do podcasts with that that are on, they see movies, they see quite a few, right? They are constantly going to the movie theater. That it's almost like a it's a I think they probably treat the theater the way I treat going to a baseball game, right? Like I'll go to see a Phillies game just to sit in the park and just take in the game and just let it kind of, be kind of my sanctuary. And I think the movie theater is like that for a lot of people. And I think the interesting thing when you think about that is that if you treat the movie theater as your sanctuary, right? The same way that like I treat the baseball park. The difference is that when I go to the baseball park and like there's a kid kicking my seat behind me, or obviously people are making noise, right? Because people are going to be yelling at a game. I just sort of accept that as part of the deal. It's like, okay, yes, the ballpark is my sanctuary, but if there's a kid behind me kicking my seat, I'm not going to get mad because there's a good chance that's that kid's first game. It's possible he's not going to remember because parents for some reason take kids to baseball games when they're too young to be going to baseball games, and so at that point they don't remember. But I want that to be their first experience. And it is interesting. I wonder if there's a similar vibe where parents take kids to the movies the same way they take kids to sporting events and things like that, where they just don't care that they're acting up. And so then if a child has been raised in that environment of, I don't care that you're acting up at this movie, then they don't see the movie theater as a sacred space the way we saw the movie theater as a sacred space, right? We even when cell phones were becoming a thing in the early 2000s, it was understood that you turned your cell phone off for the movie, right? You didn't have your cell phone on. You weren't checking it all the time. And yes, when I sit and watch a movie at home, I'm on IMDb constantly trying to figure, who is that person? And where do I know that person from? That kind of thing. Or what other movies have they done? I'm always pausing the movie and doing that kind of thing. So I get why younger people who are more used to using their phones would think that way. But I do think that's part of it, is I think that sort of that generation of parents that kind of came in, like my parents, when they had my younger siblings, they didn't really parent them the way that a lot of other parents were parenting their kids at that time. In fact, I think my parents were more helicopter-y with my sister and I, who were older, than they were with my younger siblings, right? By the time they had my younger siblings, it was almost like they were too tired to care. They were more the latchkey kids, right, than my sister and I. But which is kind of not how it works, right? When I think about, like, for example, going to Chuck E. Cheese, when my sister and I would go to Chuck E. Cheese in the early 80s, there was this big Elvis room where this big lion would do, Elvis impersonating lion would like do Elvis songs, and that's where the parents hung out. And it was just, it's like this den of iniquity that was just filled with smoke and pitchers of beer, and you didn't know if the pizza that you were going to grab a slice of had a cigarette put out in it or something like that, and you go in and ask your parents for more money, for more tokens, and my dad would like have his cigarette and he'd have like the eye squint with the one cigarette, like trying to fish out his wallet and get some cash to hand me, and it was really just give me the money just to get me out of there, and I remember later when my siblings were going there, I remember like, I don't know if they did this for my siblings or if that was something that came even later, like with my friends when they had kids, or my sister with my nephew, taking my nephew, or them with their kids, where you'd all get stamped together. And it was like this thing where you go in together and you leave together, so you don't leave with other people's kids. And I think like in the 80s when I was going to Chuck E. Cheese, that was a feature for the parents, right? It was like, we could lose some kids. This is great. Like, how did Jimmy get home, right? I thought we left him there or something like that. And now it's like, you can't leave your kid. Maybe that's why Chuck E. Cheese did it. It's not so much that they're worried about child predators. They were like tired of people dumping their kids off at Chuck E. Cheese. But anyway, right, it was a different mindset. But I do think there were certain things that my parents taught us when it came to going to the movies. And it was like, you don't talk during a movie. You don't, you don't bother, you don't do any of that kind of stuff during the movie. Now, granted, did I listen to those things? I mean, I remember my friend Petrowski and I, we'd do all kinds of things in the movie theater. I remember the very first time we saw a movie together, it was Wolf. And he showed me in his coat that he had a wolf mask with him. And the idea was when, at a certain point in the movie, he was going to put the wolf mask on and tap whoever was sitting in front of us on the shoulder and say, excuse me, ma'am, do you have the time? In the wolf mask. And if they screamed, I was supposed to get up and point and say, you can't handle the truth, from, A Few Good Men. And the people sitting in front of us were completely just, the woman that he tapped on the shoulder, she shot him a death stare when he did that. And he just sat back down. But we were pulling crap like that. We saw Attack of the Clones. We'd already seen it a couple times at the theater. We were killing time on a Saturday afternoon, which was something you could do. A movie was cheap enough that, for $4 you could go sit in the theater and kill time. And Attack of the Clones had been in the theater long enough that it wasn't really that crowded. And my friend Petrowski and I, we sat in the back corner and just made fart noises the whole time while Attack of the Clones was playing. And it's like, am I proud of that? Probably not, and I probably shouldn't even be admitting that here now. But yeah, so it wasn't like we treated the theater like a sacred space either, but we understood that what we were doing was bad, right? We understood that we shouldn't be behaving this way. And so, and I think, to that stage, we wouldn't be like opening our phones in the theater, or, if it was a new movie and everybody was excited to see it, we wouldn't be doing any of that kind of stuff. But I think for a lot of kids, based on what I see a lot of times with kids in places like ballparks or, on trains, planes, things like that, there's a kind of a sense of like, just let the kids run around and do whatever they're doing. Like, as a parent, I can't be bothered to stop my kid from running all over the place, let alone kicking the person's seat in front of me, and, making a lot of noise. And I think, kids growing up especially in that period, there were a lot of kids movies that were big, like especially the whole Pixar thing. And parents would just take their kids to those movies and just let them run amok, right? And there was a sense too of like, oh, it's a let kids be kids environment, When I would get sent to the movie, when I go to the movies to see like 101 Dalmatians or whatever it was that was showing as a kid at that time, I was the movie theater was considered a sacred space. It was like you sit and you watch the movie, and if you can't handle it, then okay, we're not taking you to the movies again until you're older. That was the mindset, but that's not really what it was for kids growing up. There was that idea of a kids movie would be a kid's space. And I think as those kids got older, the movie theater wasn't a sacred space, and it's not a place where you keep your phone off. Of course you look at your phone. Why wouldn't you look at your phone while you're in the movie theater? You look at it anywhere else. And so I think that's a part of it, maybe that's why. And again, I don't have any of those people in the movie theater with me when I'm at a morning matinee. And I think that's, maybe that's the key, right? But I think for a lot of people that I talk to that are fans of going to the movies, there's a part of it that going at night on a Saturday night is part of the allure, or Friday night or something like that. That's part of the nostalgia and the sanctuary piece, the piece of the movie theater being the sanctuary. As you go on an evening during the weekend, and it feels like what you did in the past. And when you do that, right, you've got more kids on their phones or more young people on their phones who don't care and don't care that it's disrupting your experience. Also people getting up, right? People are constantly getting up. Again, I think that might also have to do with the attention span part of it. I know my attention span has been completely compromised by my cell phone. I have trouble reading now. I used to love reading books, and now it's like I can't sit still and read enough. And today I had jury duty, and we're waiting to find out what was happening. What was going on was that the case that we were supposed to be called to be jurors on, they ended up the defendant in the case ended up pleading out. And of course, they can't tell you that the defendant might be pleading out, because if they don't plea out, right, that completely biases that'll completely bias our opinion on the case, and we're going to think, well, he's thinking about pleading, maybe he's guilty or whatever. So we're sitting there waiting, and I was reading my book. I'm reading the Onion Eaters by J.P. Dunleavy. You might know he did the Ginger Man, and I got through a couple chapters, and like I can't keep reading, like I can't focus. So then, like, where I would, of course, what I would do is I didn't have my phone on either. I was just thinking about podcasting. Like, I was like, gathering thoughts for like the Deadpool podcast or for this opening here. And so that's what I was doing. So maybe it looks worse, right? Maybe it looks like what the kids call raw dogging it, right? When you go, you take a flight and you don't have any kind of entertainment with you. They maybe people around me thought I was raw dogging it when I was really just, gathering thoughts for the podcast here. But it is one of those things, right, that like my mindset is completely compromised. But I think for younger people, it's even worse, right? And how do you sit through a movie? You got to get up, right? You can't, at some point you got to get up and walk around or something. But it can be disruptive, right? I mean, when I go to a game, it's part of the process. Again, with baseball park being my sanctuary, getting up so people can go and get concessions or something like that, it's just part of the process. And I accept it and I'm okay with it. But the movie theater, right? It's you're not supposed to be getting up, right? You're supposed to sit there and watch the film, and it's like I got to go to the bathroom, but I want to watch the whole movie, right? I'll hold it until the movie's done and I'm done with the credits, and I'll go after that. But no, I think that's another piece of it. So I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be like in the future going to movies. I don't know if like everybody who's older is just going to have to do matinees. But I will say, if I can sell the matinee to people who have been struggling with the theater going experience, the matinee is the way to go, because I really, really enjoyed seeing Deadpool and Wolverine in that environment, having an entire seat almost entire row to myself. I can put my book bag on the seat next to me. I've got with the AMC dine-in, I've got my own little table with a cup holder in it, so I can set up my popcorn and stuff there. I can slouch and relax, and I can stretch my feet out there. And people walking by, which again, nobody was walking by because it was a matinee, so nobody was even walking past me. But if they did, I wouldn't have to pull my feet in because there's so much leg room that they can get by. So it's a really nice, relaxing experience. But I get it too that Sunday matinees were not what we did. Growing up, right? It wasn't like, oh man, I can't wait to get up at 8:30 in the morning and catch a 10:15 matinee of Deadpool Wolverine, right? It's like, no, what are we doing Saturday night, right? We're gonna get something to eat, we're going to watch this movie, and then we're going to go to a diner after and talk about how much we love the movie. Or in the case of, Star Wars Phantom Menace in 99, we're at the diner drinking our coffee, friends were smoking their cigarettes and talking about how much they didn't like the movie, right? How much they were underwhelmed by the movie. But that was the process, right? That was the 3-step process that the 10:15 a.m. matinee doesn't include at all, right? There is there's no opening meal, right? There's no dinner. And there's certainly no going to a diner after. I was going by myself to that movie. I sat by myself and watched it. And then I walked around and did the errands after, right? I went to Target. I went to Acme and picked up some drinks for my wife and that kind of thing. So I get it. I get to too, and so, but yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to kind of see how the movie theater goes. I do think there is a part of it. Maybe there needs to be like an education process if that's part of it. It's mostly younger people and they don't understand the movie theater as that sacred space, and nobody's policing it, right? It seems like that's a key, right? Is that there are no ushers. When I was, yes, there was no usher coming in when my buddy and I were doing fart noises to Attack of the Clones because nobody else cared, right? The movie theater wasn't like that. But I do know, at times when my friends and I would be a little bit more rambunctious, the ushers would come and tell us, you can't stop making noise, stop doing that, whatever. So maybe they need to have ushers that are just like, hey, stop using your phone. Put your phone away. You're disrupting it for everybody else. But I don't think we should have ushers doing it, right? I think people just need to understand to put their phone away. And I do think, yes, there are people that are just bad people. They're just bad humans, and they don't, those are the people that when you get on the plane, the first thing they do on an hour-long flight is they lean their seat back all the way, right? Those aren't good people, right? They're going to use their phone in a movie theater and not think anything of it. But I think the epidemic level of it, I think, is more than just bad people. But again, until it changes, I just if I can, I'll sell that 10:15 a.m. matinee on a Sunday, which means you got to get up early on a Sunday as well, I guess. So there's that too. All right, I have rambled enough. I didn't think I was going to ramble quite this long, and once I got going, right, that was it. Once I get going on these rants, it just goes. So let's do our theme song from John Cross at After Movie Diner and miscellaneous polling fixtures. Then when we come back, Will from Exploding Helicopters on, and we're going to be looking at Equalizer 2000. All right, I am back, and we are joined once again here by Will from Exploding Helicopter. Welcome back, Will.
Thanks for inviting me back, Matt.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this before on here. Neither of us drive. Is that correct? Like neither of us drive cars.
Yes, that's right. I don't drive.
No. So neither of us came to the podcasting our podcast recording session in spiked vehicles because if the apocalypse ever came, we would both be in a lot of trouble, I feel.
Yeah, we would be doomed. I think we would. Yeah, our lack of ability to get ourselves around the desolate, barren plains of I don't know, 22nd century Earth would condemn us to a quick and probably a quick and painful death.
Yes, yeah. So it's to give people an idea. We're talking the post-apocalyptic movie. We're going to be talking about Equalizer 2000 today, but just that post-apocalyptic movie. It seems like the first thing to go is the rail system, right? You never see any kind of train system in the post-apocalyptic movie.
It never takes you long to get back to high-speed rail, does it, Matt? In the United States.
No, no. It kind of it's interesting because in America, of course,
Has
obviously
there ever
it's
been one though? Sorry to cut. Has there ever been
so the
like a post-apocalyptic train movie?
I mean, I guess Snowpiercer, does that count?
Hmm. I mean, that's the only one I can think of. But it's.
No.
What's the? Yeah. I'm sort of. I'm wary on including that one at the moment. But I
Yeah.
could be persuaded.
Right. So yeah, because I guess when you think about it, right? Because either A, they're filmed in the Philippines, right? Which because of it being in archipelago. Is that what I'm saying? Archipelago. A whole
Archipelago.
archipelago. It you're right. It's more like a collection of ferries than it is uh than a collection of railway, right? Which I guess they're starting to develop more sort of within the different islands. But yeah, so obviously, yeah, there's not going to be a lot of trains where those are filming. But Italy, right? I would think Italy would have a developed rail system. But I guess for the filmmakers in Italy, right? The idea of sophisticated European rail existing in the apocalypse. I guess they probably don't have their like kind of old timey stuff. Like in America, you probably could go to like a you know, uh, like a Western movie
Hmm.
set and get like old rail stuff that you could use for this kind of thing.
Probably. I mean, they should. Well, they should come to the UK where we get to ride around on very old rolling stock.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Same here in America. I discovered this because we've had a lot of issues with and the Northeast corridor is kind of like the heaviest rail traffic in the United States. So between like Boston, Massachusetts, down through Washington D.C. So it's not a large corridor. It's like an 8 hour, like driving wise, it's like an 8 hour stretch. But it's the most heavily trafficked rail corridor. And what I didn't know is that the infrastructure is the same as it was in the 1920s. So like the cables, the electric cables that power it constantly are going down. And there's these huge delays, especially going into New York. And it's like, it's amazing that like even the most heavily trafficked corridor, I mean, they're upgrading the high speed rail, the Acela trains, but even those like they've been having trouble rolling out the new versions. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing that a lot of times you're riding on trains that even the trains are newer, but the actual infrastructure that's carrying those trains has existed since before the Second World War.
And probably will exist in the post-apocalyptic future as well.
Right. Well, because it is a fascinating thing. That, like, I guess it's one of those elements of the post-apocalypse. Because a lot of times these movies take place in America. That yeah, if you're anywhere in the Northeast corridor, that train, considering that these people in the future are able to use, vehicles, they're able to find enough oil to use vehicles. You'd think they'd be able to find a way to power electric grids, but maybe not. Maybe that's part of why there's no trains, right? It's the electric powered ones you can't use them.
I guess not, but I mean, I started. This has planted a seed in my mind. I'm starting to think about, okay, could do a sort of post-apocalyptic train movie, like, or they should have done one back in the 80s. And it would be. I'm thinking it'd be sort of like Von Ryan's Express meets Mad Max, where
Right.
you have the sort of classic plot trope of group of people and they've got to get to the other coast because I don't know, life is better over there, and they're never going to get across. They're never going to get, they're never going to survive getting across America on foot or by car. So they decide to do it by train. And yeah, they got to get this train up and running. They're going from one coast of America to another. They have various encounters with, marauding bands, etc. All while trying to keep the train running. There's probably some, guy with a grudge who's, chasing after them on another train because, like we're not reinventing the wheel here, Matt. We're just recycling the same plot tropes. That could have worked. Could be like an old steam train that they've got out of some museum or something that they're trying to make this journey on. I think that could work.
Yeah, I wonder if it had Waterworld and The Postman done better, if that would have been the third, like Kevin Costner, right? Like post-apocalyptic trilogy thing where he would have been that hero. Maybe, I don't know if you bring back Dennis Hopper as the baddie or I never saw The Postman, so I don't know who the baddie was in that. But yeah, I wonder if that's where he would have gone had The Postman been more successful.
He'd never have stopped making post-apocalyptic movies. I like this alternative universe where Kevin Costner just sort of becomes I mean what who made like I know like the David Carradine of big budget post nuke movies.
Right, right. Yeah, it was and they would have these bloated budgets, and it's almost like I think, because Dances with Wolves was such a success that he just had this idea that like I can just keep making stuff, and it and I guess he's finally gotten there with Yellowstone and those movies, but he just kept making stuff, and none of it ever seemed to work.
Well, this is the strange thing about this Horizons project that he has, you know, famously put all his money into to kind of make these films. And you just thought, well, surely, Kevin Costner would have drawn the lessons from his career in the 90s of like, when he was, these vanity projects that he was making in the 90s, and they all tanked to varying degrees, and he built his career back up again, obviously not to the same levels of stardom, but I mean he was making some very well reviewed films, and then he's then decided, what, I really I want to I, I want to make another massive vanity project. He's, I guess, I guess the 90s were a long time ago now, and memories fade.
Well, because yeah, I think what it is, right, is that he can't help himself. I think is what it is. He's Kevin Costner. I always joke whenever somebody puts on Twitter or something, they do those like engagement farming posts, and they're like, oh, what's your favorite Kevin Costner movie? I always say The Big Chill. That's my favorite Kevin Costner movie. So,
He's a corpse in that, isn't he?
right. He actually they cut all of his scenes out. I believe there's a version that has his, because I guess Kasdan originally, he shot all these scenes with Kevin Costner, and that was the original plan, was to have him in them. And when DVD first became, kind of started to replace VHS, there was this idea that with DVDs you could watch the version that had those scenes edited back in. And Lawrence Kasdan's like, no, I edited him out for a reason. I wanted that feeling of him not being there. And so yeah, so I always joke that yeah, they just completely cut him out. Like they don't even show, like they show like his body but not his face when he's a corpse. So yeah.
Did
Uh,
they work together again though, didn't they? I
I think
think.
so. Yeah, with Lawrence Kasdan. Yes, I think you're right. Boy, I'm trying to think what that would have been. But I think you're right.
Was it Silverado? I don't. Was it that?
Could
Anyway,
have.
oh well.
Yeah, because
Who knows?
Kasdan was, he was a pretty big deal in the 80s. He was, Silverado. Yeah, he wrote Silverado. I don't know if he directed it as well. And of course he did Wyatt Earp too. But yeah, yeah, he directed it as well. Silverado. Yeah, you're
So
absolutely
it
correct.
had a happy ending then. So they didn't become
Right.
bitter enemies to the end of their days.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Though he did make, Kevin Kline was the star of that one as well. So, yeah, so he's always likes working with Kevin Kline. I actually, my novel, Don's House in the Mountains, I do a chapter called The Big Chill, where they're all Gen X characters, but they kind of come back, and it's actually they're older. They're 10 years older than the Big Chill characters, but essentially like the main character, his friends come back, and his friend Alex dies hiking, or ice climbing. But yeah, my main character is more of the Tom Berenger one, because he's like this famous author. And so yeah, and I don't think I had a Jeff Goldblum character in that one, so I didn't fully do the all the characters from The Big Chill.
Was that just a little were you just amusing yourself, or were you in terms of that chapter title, or were you have the other all kind of like subtle Easter eggs with all of your chapter titles in that?
No, yeah, so no, it was one of those things where I'd mapped out the entire novel, and then I was watching The Big Chill with my wife, and I was like, oh, this would actually make a really good chapter because the main character, there's kind of almost like a Tempest vibe to the novel. Actually, kind of more like Iris Murdoch's The Sea, where this main character, the main character, his wife splits with him after he becomes a famous author, and he moves to this big fancy house in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, and essentially the entire book takes place there. There's one small part where he goes to New York City for like a day trip and comes back, but otherwise it's all there in this place, and then people kind of come to him, and so in that main that kind of that second there's like an opening chapter that kind of sets the stage for who he is, and then the next chapter is that I don't, for whatever reason, I was like, oh, this is actually a good idea. I can have his college friends show up, because one of them dies, and make that a chapter, and then yeah, the other ones, they aren't really, yeah, they aren't based off of other things like that. There's one that's called that has like other authors showing up, and he's meeting with other authors some of
Okay.
them I'd established in other books. And then there's one called his character is Don Veazey. It's called the Veazey Bunch, where like his daughter and some of his nieces and nephews show up, and it's like almost like the house is overrun by college kids. So yeah, so there's that scene. And the other thing too is yeah, the William Hurt character, he becomes friends with the main, he kind of rekindles his friendship with the main character, and actually like opens a psych a therapy practice in the town and stuff like that. So I actually bring that character throughout the rest of the books. I keep him in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Clever.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's sometimes that happens, with inspiration. It's just like you're watching something, and which it's funny because I'm kind of putting together ideas for a new novel, and I as we watch the post-apocalyptic movies here, I didn't. It wasn't like suddenly I guess I could have a nuclear bomb go off in the end of the book, right? And suddenly they're all having to everybody's donning like leather outfits and spiked vehicles, right? That could be the end of my novel, right? Because I'm inspired by our watching these movies.
I like it. I mean, Raymond Chandler famously, if he was stuck on what to happen in a plot, he would just have somebody come through a door with a gun.
Yeah.
And so I guess your gimmick could be, you don't know what happened next. I'll just have a nuclear bomb go off, and
Right.
we'll go from there.
Exactly. Yeah. No, with these posts, no, of course, obviously, oh, I don't know if you can hear the sirens in the background here. The police are coming for me. But we recently had Furiosa, a Mad Max story, released here in the U.S. And what's interesting, I mean, that movie, I want to say, like, the budget was like, it was over 100 million. I want to say it was like, I mean, it didn't make its budget back, I believe, right? It didn't. It did that
Hmm.
poorly in the theater. Uh, but it's interesting, I guess. Like we were just talking about Kevin Costner, right, with these bloated vanity projects. 168 million was the budget for Furiosa Mad Max Saga. I mean, watching, like, for example, Equalizer 2000, which we'll be talking about here. I mean, it feels like you can make one of these movies a lot cheaper than 168 million. And then your 172 million gross worldwide actually isn't so bad.
Well, yeah, well, exactly the point. I mean, you could probably have made every like 80s post-apocalyptic movie for less than 168 million dollars. I mean, you could, yeah. I don't know how many films that would encompass, but I'm pretty much sure you could have made all of them for a lot less than that.
Yeah, I wonder because one of the interesting connections is Equalizer 2000 has Richard Norton in it, and he was a fight choreographer for Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. So I wonder what he's thinking while he's on the set there. Like, I wonder if like he's kind of having these flashbacks or like kind of reminiscing about what it was like doing these Cirio H Santiago movies or whatever. Where like probably the catering budget, I would say, maybe on Furiosa is probably like more than I mean, probably Anna Joy Taylor's salary, or what she made, or Chris Hemsworth's salary in the film is probably more than the entire budget of those movies.
He's probably also thinking, I'm glad we've got proper safety procedures for setting off explosions, but making sure that the cast are safe distances away from them.
Yes, I didn't even think of that. That's a good point too. That he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm not going to potentially die here." I imagine. Yeah, I always the ones that always get me are the AIP productions because it's just like these explosions just start going off, and it's just like, who was it? Was it Ted and David Pryor like putting these, just kind of throwing these together, or like we watched Dance and It's On with why am I trying to blank on his name?
David Winters.
David Winters, right, who was also a producer on all those AIP films. Like, I can't even imagine what he would think of, like, he wouldn't even, like, the idea of rigging explosions probably would make no sense to him. He's like, okay, whatever you say, that sounds good enough to me. And yeah, there's always that sense of danger watching those movies.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of, we all sort of. I mean, Tom Cruise gets a lot of plaudits for the sort of stunt work that he does these days, but I mean, yeah, I mean, sure, he's putting himself in danger, but he's not putting himself in the same danger as any of the actors were who were working on, yeah, some of these Filipino or Italian productions were back in the 80s, where, yeah, they were working cheap, they were working fast, and yeah, there's always some more extras you can hire if yeah, somebody gets injured.
Right. Well, that's the thing, right? Is that um, those parts of the world, yeah, there's always somebody willing to step up. And so yeah, I mean, it's part of the reason why I guess they filmed, especially in the Philippines, right, was that Roger Corman was like, okay, well, I can keep my costs down here, and I guess Australia not being too far away, right, uh you can always pull a Richard Norton and put him in the film, and match him up with Vic Diaz. And though it's interesting is we also had Robert Patrick, who was starting his career with these movies. So they but like you said, you could always find more people. I mean, it's interesting to think like what Robert Patrick, right, like had he been injured or anything in any of these movies, right, like that we wouldn't, who would we have gotten as our baddie in Terminator 2?
We owe it all to Cirio.
Right, exactly. Now, one of the things, though, of course, this genre of movie, this post-apocalyptic. I mean, of course, in the '80s, right? You had these Italian rip-offs, and of course, then like with what we'll be talking about here with Equalizer 2000, it's almost like Cirio H. Santiago is kind of working in that Italian knockoff tradition. But it's interesting, right? Because the idea of an Italian knockoff, right? We always think of Italy as creating like the best of everything, right? Like, it's like you when you go to like I don't know where it is in London, but in the US, in New York, it's Canal Street, or at least it used to be, that had all the knockoffs, right? So you would get your fake,
Mm.
Gucci or Prada or whatever there. But yeah, it's interesting that for movies, Italian knockoffs, they're actually the ones doing the knocking off.
Yeah, I mean, it's as you say, there's sort of, yeah, there's a lot of truly great Italian cinema, but they also know how to slum it as well. And yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy between those two worlds. And yeah, I think Italians. I think there's I'm not a legal expert, but I've heard other people sort of refer to it. I think there's just sort of copyright law enforcement, and I think, well, and also the Italian legal system is notoriously labyrinthine.
Right.
So I think that created an environment in which flagrant copyright breaches you kind of get away with a lot more in Italy than you could say trying to do something shamelessly copycat as you could in another part of the world. And yeah, that sort of freedom, or a blase legal observance, yeah, just created a really sort of fertile ground for dozens and dozens of filmmakers to make any number of knockoffs, whether it's French Connection and Dirty Harry knockoffs with the Poliziotteschi genre. Then sort of you have oh god, I mean, there wasn't all of those sort of sword going back to the sort of sword and sandals, like knocking off the kind of like the biblical epics. I mean, there's just wasn't a genre that the Italians left alone if they thought they could get a few quid out of it.
Right. Well, yeah, because then you have the shark movies. There's a whole
Oh
series of
yes.
those in the 80s. It's interesting because, like, when you look at one of the if you look at any of the, like, for example, if you look at Enzo Castellari, it's like a mix in the 80s of, uh, you know, um, post-apocalyptic movies, shark movies, and then, I think Light Blast was like a spy 007 kind of movie, right? So you're also knocking off those, and like in the 70s, of course, you think of like Guns of the Navarone and Where Eagles Dare. That's when you get like Inglorious Bastards, right? You get like it's like you said, like it's like there's no genre left unknocked off, I guess.
Mm.
Yes, it's and like you said too, like that the sword and sandal thing, right? Like they started with kind of like the biblical thing, and then it's almost like they transitioned into Conan the Barbarian style stuff when that became more popular.
Yep.
So they were also very malleable in what they could do.
They're sort of like weather vanes, weren't they? They're just like
Yes.
wherever the commercial wind was blowing, they just turned their direction, just yeah, turned their filmmaking in that direction.
One thing I kind of, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this, because with Cirio H Santiago, it's going to be a little bit different because he's obviously from the Philippines, so it's a little bit different aesthetic. But it seems like with the Italians, I don't know if you've noticed this when you watch westerns, where like the spaghetti western versus like an American western. American westerns, it feels like there's a sense of like taming the wild, right? Like creating a sense of law and order. I think of like High Noon is a great example of that. Or but also like some of the Clint Eastwood driven ones where it's like there's bad guys that need to be, that there needs to be like one lawman coming in and taking care of these bad guys. Whereas the Italian ones, there's this almost like this love of like the uncivilized nature, like sort of like the savage nature of the untamed nature of the West, and they kind of long for that. I guess maybe being from Italy, right? Being sort of the descendants of the Roman Empire, right? That like everything they've always grown up with an area being completely built up, and they kind of like this idea of like something being carved out of nothing. And that almost seems to be like the way that they approach these post-apocalyptic films as well. That there's almost like this dream of like burning everything down and seeing what it's like when there's no civilization.
Well, I guess it is the because obviously they're one step removed, aren't they? They're taking inspiration from another country's a sort of genre invented by another country, and then they are seeing it through their own prism or reflecting it through their own prism. So obviously, with that idea of American westerns and taming the West, well, that when they're made by Americans, well, that's kind of like that's your national story. So it's just sort of natural, almost inevitable that some element of that is going to be introduced into the story. Whereas, if you've got Italians making a Western, well, that's not what they see. That's not their history. That's not their story. So they're not going to, they don't feel that kinship with that kind of storytelling element. So they're going to see it through their own eyes and emphasize, different themes and different qualities.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the other thing too, of course, is that the westerns that came in the '60s, they were kind of a reaction to what many like kind of older middle Americans, especially say white Americans as well, saw as like the lawlessness of the '60s,
Mm.
and they were kind of longing for this sort of reinstitution of law and order. And I think that's another piece of why those westerns were so popular. I mean, here in America with the retro channels, it's like if you watch the westerns during the day, it's like they're almost all these characters fighting like some sort of like these sort of counterculture baddies that I guess reflect like the beatniks or later like
Yeah.
the hippies, right? That were like, blowing things, in their mind, blowing things up and causing problems. And it's like, oh, we need a Ronald Reagan or a Nixon to come in, Dick Nixon, and fix all this stuff for us. And in Italy, right? In Italy again, there would have been a completely different mindset because they'd coming out of fascism. A lot of these directors grew up in that. That was their formative years on the planet. In the 30s and 40s would have been under Mussolini, and they're like, huh, like I don't want that. Like I want people that can kind of fight against that or rebel
Mm.
against that kind of mindset.
Well, just to pick up on something you were saying about westerns, I think actually like thinking about westerns is quite interesting in terms of what we're talking about here in terms of post-apocalyptic movies, because I think that almost post-nuke movies are almost like the westerns of 1950s cinema, whereas they were just they were just something that could be very cheaply made and churned out very quickly, and you didn't need a lot of stuff. I mean, with a sort of with a western, you just need some horses, and you just need some people, out by some mountains or by some boulders, and come up with some plot about, I don't know, people looking for gold or somebody out for revenge, and there you go. You can shoot that in 18 days, and you've got a movie. You don't need huge sets or anything. You just need the landscape and I say landscape and a couple of horses. And I think post nuke movies sort of were a kind of a similar sort of I think that's one of the reasons why they became so hugely prevalent in the 80s in the wake of Mad Max, which really sort of put turbo boosters under that particular genre, because you just needed, okay, we just need some sort of barren landscape, some tricked out cars. We need to get some guys in some shoulder pads, give them some give them some kind of black gloves, give them some sort of spiky looking armor, some American football shoulder pads, and yeah, we've got a post nuke movie.
Right. Well, and also to your point about westerns is that one thing that made westerns cheap as well was that you could recycle, right? You could recycle sets, you could recycle costumes. I mean, that's part of the reason why westerns, I think, kind of got a little bit of a resurgence in the DTV world. Is that if you're filming, you could film in LA, you could film just outside of LA, use some of those sets, and I think the same thing is probably true with these post-apocalyptic movies, that whether it's in Italy, right, where they're filming on sound stages that they used for westerns originally, now they can recycle those sets and those kinds of things. But then also too, I mean, you think of Roger Corman, who's doing like the Cirio H Santiago movies, and the other Italian directed ones in the Philippines. I mean, for him, the idea of recycling stuff, for to cut costs is like right up his alley. So he's going to do that too.
Yeah, what more? What do you need? You need like an old quarry, a
Right.
disused factory, some sort of building that's falling down. You don't, you can just work with, you don't even need expensive sound stages. You just need something that looks like it's been ruined or look like it's been untouched by human hand for 20 or 30 years, and you've got the environment for a post nuke movie.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I think with the ones shot in the Philippines, like this one here, with the climate being nice and warm, you also don't need much in terms of clothes. I mean, Richard Norton, shirt is optional, right? Just wear the vest and you're fine.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. Has there ever been? Well, yep. I can't think of a. I mean, they talk about nuclear winter. I mean, we don't see them in these post-nuke movies, do we? It's always hot.
Right, right, exactly. Well, yeah, because what's interesting about this movie here, Equalizer 2000, is that it says it takes place in North Alaska. Like, I guess the idea is that after the nuclear winter, everything is just like, I guess it's either first like really cold and then it becomes really hot, and so I guess Alaska is the only place with a climate temperate enough for humans to live. I can't imagine, like, I mean, one of the things, of course, that would have been interesting, and I guess again, it's beyond the scope of a movie like this to do that. But one of the things about Alaska is that it's either all, there's periods of the year where it's either all daylight or all darkness. And it would be interesting if they did kind of that kind of thing.
Okay, so sort of, yeah, 30 days of night
Right.
post nuke. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what would that have added, though? I'm not sure that
You're
that
right.
would have added an awful lot, apart
No,
from difficulties in filming.
right. Well, that's probably the thing, right? Is that you got to film this thing, either all at night or during the day, right? You got to film when you can film when it comes to this kind of a movie. So, yeah, yeah, for sure. Now, I mean, that one of the things I guess with Cirio H Santiago right now is he the top director when it comes to. Oh no, it was one of the Pepin or Merhi now, right, for PM.
No, it's our man Cirio.
It is okay.
He's the top director for films with exploding helicopters.
Which is kind of amazing to kind of see like what he does for, because these post-apocalyptic movies aren't really known for exploding helicopters because after the apocalypse, right, you can't, though it's interesting because is it that far-fetched if you've got spiked cars, and you've got all manner of weapons, and somehow all of the ammunition and everything survives the post-apocalypse, or somehow, they never really show this, but somehow, industry starts back up and they're able to start producing munitions again. But the helicopter is the thing that just, I guess maybe, nobody knows how to fly it, right? Like everybody who knew how to fly a helicopter died. And so then, but even if they had like a shell of a helicopter, but either way, like helicopters don't blow up in these movies that much.
No, and you don't see them. So, and it's a little bit. I I think these films don't perhaps survive much intellectual scrutiny, because I mean, even you've got cars, you've got vehicles, but they run on oil, and refining oil to a state where it can be used in a motorized vehicle is actually quite a sophisticated process, and it's often very you watch these post-nuke movies and you just think, okay, like you look at the state of the world at that time and you just think, okay, where is this, where is the fuel for these vehicles being processed to a caliber that it can be used in a vehicle? So there is some sort of inconsistencies that don't survive a lot of intellectual scrutiny.
So in that sense, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if a helicopter showed up here or there. Though I guess too, from Roger Corman's standpoint, is like the whole idea of this taking place at this time, right? We don't want a helicopter showing up because it costs us more money to hire the pilot and all of that, I guess. But part of the reason why I think Cirio H. Santiago makes why he makes your list is that the other popular knockoff genre of the 80s was the Rambo knockoff and the Vietnam War movie knockoff. And he did a ton of those in the 80s as well.
He certainly did. And I was thinking about this. I mean, just how many movies did he make where there were sort of two groups of men like shooting at each other with machine guns, whether they're whether it was in the 23rd century in a kind of nuclear holocaust set Earth, or whether it was during the Vietnam War. I mean, there just was always some group of men stumbling out of a tree line or kind of clambering over some rocks, firing at another group of men with guns. And as I was watching the film for this, I was just thinking, how many? I mean, Santiago, he must have thousands. There must be thousands and thousands of these scenes that he's shot of just people, firing machine guns at each other.
It's absolutely amazing when you think about I remember Albert Pyun said that when he got his start in the film industry, it was actually cutting trailers for Cirio H. Santiago movies. So he would have been doing the ones that were like the blaxploitation films that he did in the 70s, some of those kinds of ones, a TNT Jackson or something. And so that's the other thing too, right? Is that you look at his directing history, and he's got these genres where he's doing so many things, but it's like, yeah, like once he gets into the 80s, it's almost like Roger Corman's on the phone just saying like, okay, almost I don't know if like Corman's taking scripts and putting them into either the post-apocalyptic pile or the Vietnam War movie pile. And I wonder too if there's a sense of like we can use the script for both. We just have to tweak it a little bit. And Santiago's like, okay, well, so when I shot this scene before, it was guys in army fatigues, in the jungle. So now at the post-apocalyptic thing, we'll go out to the desert location and we'll just stage it the same way. So he probably tells his assistants like get everybody in the same way that you had them in the last movie, and just have them all lined up there. So now it's all guys with like leather jackets and football helmets that are going to do the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, there is some variations within it, but yeah, it's a lot of the same stuff again and again.
Yes. Yeah. Now. One of the things before we get into the film, I wanted to talk about the star of this, Richard Norton, because I don't know if we've talked about a Richard Norton film on here before. I don't know if we've had a chance to discuss him. So I don't know what your thoughts are on him as a leading guy.
He's not somebody I have seen in a whole bunch of stuff. I've definitely seen some of his movies. He's in what's that? Oh, one of this. Oh, I can't remember. But really blanking on the. He's in that. What's that one he's in with Rothrock? No Retreat, No Surrender 2, isn't he, or something like
So,
that?
so he's in the Rage and Honor movies and the China O'Brien movies with her, and then I don't know if he did No Retreat, No Surrender with her as well. I think
I can
it's
remember
those
imagining it.
four. Yeah, I think it's those ones that he did. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
he worked a few times, didn't he, with
yeah,
Rothrock, didn't he? I mean,
yes.
so I might be anyway. My mind is playing tricks on me there, but yeah, yeah, Norton. In all honesty, Matt, not a guy I got a huge bunch of opinions about. I've seen him in some films. Um, it's always struck me as okay. Yeah, I haven't got much more beyond that. What are your thoughts on him? As
Well,
I've got none.
he's a very serviceable lead. I think that's probably the best,
Yeah, definitely
Yeah.
agree with
I,
that.
I think one of the things about him that I've always appreciated is I think he did Midnight Express or Millionaires Express, sorry, Millionaires Express in the mid 80s with Rothrock. And that was like her first movie, I think. And I think he saw the potential in her, like he saw her talent and how good she is. And one of the things it seems like when he did movies with her is he recognized her as the star, and he didn't like try to like either compete or take over the movie from her. There are a couple like Raging on Her 2, I think is one that sort of becomes his movie. It's sort of made more his movie, but that's just sort of how the movie was made. And I always appreciated that he saw her as a star and as like a someone who was a really big talent, and he wanted the world to see that talent. And I think especially with as a woman in the action world, it would have been easy to sort of, and I have a feeling the movies that were being made, they wanted Norton to be the star and her to be the supporting character, and he sort of kind of worked in reverse to kind of make her the star, and I've always appreciated that about him.
Well, yeah. I mean, don't know. Can't speak to what decisions were going on behind the scenes, but yeah, certainly sounds like yeah. There's you're always you hear the stories of the actors on the sets of the Fast and Furious movies where where Vin Diesel is counting the number of punches that was sort of the number of hits that he gets in compared to like Jason Statham or some of the other people in the film. He's saying, "Oh, I need to beat down three more guys, otherwise I'm walking off the set." And yeah, I'm always I'm always it's good to know that there are actors out there who not bringing their ego onto set.
Yeah. Now, Richard Norton definitely seemed that way. And I guess another connection with him is that he was in Roadhouse 2, which I haven't seen yet, but we just did the last time you were on, we did the two Roadhouse movies. And yeah, so I guess he's the baddie in that one. He plays baddies a good amount as well. And again, it just seems like give me whatever role you want. And I guess I appreciate now, like you said, with the Vin Diesel aspect, that he's doing these Mad Max movies, these modern Mad Max films. So he's like, kind of the way that like Dolph got to be in the Aquaman movies. He's getting and he also works as fight coordinator or fight choreographer for these Mad Max movies. So he's able to do modern films. He's getting modern work, which I think is really cool.
He's definitely sort of increased the longevity of his film by having that by being able to coordinate the stunts on these movies and able to do double duty as well because he can kind of you know do the stunt work and then he can just be a little bit part in a scene being some sort of tough guy who round kicks a guy and then gets dispatched quickly or whatever he can so handy to have somebody who can wear multiple hats like that on set.
Yeah, and to your point about the ego piece, right? I don't think we'd see Vin Diesel in, what is Norton's now in his 70s, actually. He's born in 1950, so he's definitely, he's getting up there. But I don't think we'll see Vin Diesel in 15 years, right? Doing like bit parts and like I imagine in 15 years he's still going to be counting the amount of punches that he gets in a scene versus his co-stars.
Yeah, and what is the future for Vin Diesel? I mean, that is a that is an interesting question because, yeah, what's he? I mean, he's still trying to get some heat together, isn't he, with the other franchises he's been in? But I really don't know how much more. Uh, I yeah, I don't think there's any great huge groundswell of public love for Vin Diesel, and I think the air could go out of his career fairly quickly, but we'll find out.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that, one, of course, is the Fast and Furious films are wrapping up, and I think,
Yeah.
you know, that now that he's putting a button on those, like you said, that whether it's the Chronicles of Riddick or the Triple X movies, right? There isn't as much of a groundswell for those. I also heard that Marvel, I don't know if it's Bob Iger in particular or Kevin Feige or whoever, but I think it might have been Bob Iger was looking at the cost overruns on these Marvel movies, and one of them is like, why are we paying Vin Diesel so much to just say I am Groot? Like that just seems to be a real waste of money there. That we're like, and I guess with James Gunn, I think there was like a sense of like, oh well, James Gunn, he's kind of captured some magic, and yes, with with the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, I mean they are consistent earners for them. I mean, last year when Disney with the Marvel movies had just mostly disaster or mostly underwhelming performances, Guardians of the Galaxy still was the one that did well. So I guess there's that to say too, but I guess Kevin, sort of Bob Iger's looking at it, it's like, well, how many millions could we save by just having a regular voice actor say I am Groot? Do we need Vin Diesel to do that?
Well, I would think if I was Vin Diesel and I was relying on the Guardians of the Galaxy, I would feel that my future is very insecure because yeah,
Right.
I'm not visibly on screen. I've only got one line. Yeah, I'd be worried.
Yeah, I do wonder. I mean, who knows? Maybe the way that Seagal kind of had that, this resurgence with Keone Waxman doing like all these, you know, former
Was
CIA
it really a
agents.
resurgence?
No, maybe not a resurgence, right? Not a resurgence. What is the way to call that? Because it's not. Yeah, you're right. It's not a
Slow
resurgence. It's like
demise?
right, right, exactly. Like a series of movies. I mean, is that where Vin Diesel's going? Is like he's gonna, I mean, Keone Waxman, he's doing some movies still. He's still direct. I mean, I think Keone Waxman needed a break from the Seagal movies, right? I think he just I'm done doing Seagal. Let me just make whatever else I'm gonna make. I think he made like like a crime or murder mystery movie or something called The Ravine. It's like 2 hours long. I haven't seen it yet, but I wonder if there's a point where like he needs money and Vin Diesel's career is, like you said, is kind of fizzled out, and suddenly, like an intrepid line producer gets the two together, and suddenly now it's Vin Diesel who's the former CIA agent, right? He's like sitting in a bar in New Orleans or something when some character, some cheaper character actor shows up in a suit with a dossier and says, "Here, we need you to go to Romania and get somebody out of something or whatever."
Yeah, but the one thing that I mean, I think that's very plausible. The one thing that makes me wonder, though, about that is just the planet-sized ego of Vin Diesel. Certainly,
Right.
the planet-sized ego that he appears to have. I've never met the man, um, and would he allow himself to do that? Because certainly, that is, a very plausible future. I mean, his name would still have luster in the straight to streaming market. So, there'd definitely be paychecks for him there if he wanted to take them. But would he want to take them? Would he? I wonder if he would sort of perhaps almost go down the Costner route of actually self-financing. I mean, isn't he? He's some sort of big Dungeons and Dragons nerd.
Yes.
And I mean, he's tried to work in that genre before. He did with the Last Witch Hunter.
Right.
I'd be more likely to see him doing some self-financing, some £200 million Dungeon and Dragon style film that the kind of his own Battlefield Earth sort of thing. I think that might be. So he might need to go through that before then he puts a call into Keone Waxman.
Right. You might be right, because that's what made that's why the Fast and Furious movies, right, have these big teams, and like they're all, because he likes this idea of the Dungeon and Dragons, like the quest, right, which I don't know exactly how it works. I remember my friend and I, we did we joined some friends who were doing Dungeon and Dragons, and we just got bored of it and got our character or whatever they were, characters or whatever they were, killed off, and then we were making prank phone calls while the other people were still playing. So I don't remember if like they picked up people along the way, but I think that's like a hallmark of the Dungeon and Dragon thing. I guess is that you, while you're on your quest, you pick up other people to join your quest, and that's kind of what Vin Diesel likes to do, right? Is it like, people that were once bad guys are now, joining his quest, like Jason Statham or something.
Well, we could definitely do with losing a few people and losing them permanently,
Right.
because I mean, the number of revivals now in that series is just. I mean, I don't even know what we're doing anymore with that series.
Right. Well, because one of the things I read was that, like, in some cases, he did permanently want, or they did permanently want people to die, but then there were like these Twitter campaigns to bring them back, and he's like, well, fine, if you really want them back that badly, we'll bring them back, which is a fascinating idea. Like, I wonder, if yeah, I wonder, like, if other movie, like, I could just like, yeah, let's just bring people back, like, instead of having them die off, right? We'll just, we'll just, sure, come back and do another movie. Yeah.
I think it's a really dangerous road to go down, because then you dispense with any real sense of jeopardy. Then, as a viewer, if that starts becoming more and more commonplace, well, then you're never really going to trust anything that you see on screen. You're never going to trust that emotional moment in a film where character you're invested with does actually get sort of bumped off. I think it would be detrimental, but for the sort of for that to become too prevalent. But I don't know. Hey, look, it's Hollywood is a business, and if there's money to be made, well, then to hell with good storytelling. We're just we'll bring them back. It's fine.
Right, exactly. Well, because that's the thing, right? Is that, and I wonder too with Vin Diesel, with the ego part of it. It's like, for example, with Han, Sun Kang's character, the one that they there was a huge campaign to bring him back. Like, I mean, I don't know if there's a sense that, like, he was really good friends or like that guy was becoming cooler than him. I don't think so. It was more like The Rock, right? The Rock was the one that he was worried that The Rock was taking the franchise from him, right? That The Rock was becoming too big. So in that case, they didn't kill The Rock off; they just wrote him out, right? And now they're bringing him back because The Rock has had a series of bad performers. So I mean, you think of two guys. I mean, Vin Diesel's getting up there in age. I don't know how well Vin Diesel could do a vest with no shirt underneath, but The Rock, I think he could do some of these kinds of movies. Like, they could, they're going to make a Mad Max movie that's not, $160 million. They could make one with The Rock, I think, and make it like this, like make it like one of these kinds of movies.
I'm gonna go off on a slightly different point here, but I've just had a very malicious idea, Matt, about Vin Diesel. I'm kind of thinking, if I was a producer on the Fast and Furious films, I'd be going, you know what, Vin? What would be a great idea is if we kill your character off in this movie, and then we're kind of like we'll get a kind of Twitter campaign going again to like to bring you back.
Right.
Only you don't do the Twitter campaign to bring him back. You just kill him off, dispense with him being in the franchise, because there'll be no groundswell of support out there to actually bring him back into these movies, and then we'll be rid of him in these films once and for all.
That would be amazing, because you're right. I don't think there would be. I think there would have been. Back when he came back for the fourth movie, there was that, because, like, I think what they like shoehorned him into the third movie because the test screenings for that third movie were just so bad that they were like, well, we let's just put Vin Diesel in so we can have him in the commercials and things like that. And so, like, when he came into the fourth movie, there was a sense of like, okay, let's get Vin Diesel back. People liked it, but then it's kind of one of those things that, however many movies later, it's almost like, okay, all right, Mr. Diesel, we understand what you're doing. We get it. It's, okay, let's
they've grown into their own thing now. He's created this beast that is actually harming him because, I mean, you speak to people like, oh, what do you like about these films? But no one ever says, oh, I really like Vin Diesel. Like,
right.
it's always other characters that they say they really enjoy.
Yes, right. And I mean the other thing too, well, because I mean, when you think of like the fourth and fifth movies, it feels like like the fourth movie in particular, Scott Walker, I mean Paul Walker. I always call him Scott Walker. Paul Walker really seems to kind of take that movie, and then you bring in The Rock in the fifth one. But it's also too with the fifth one is they bring in all these characters from the previous movies, and suddenly they've created this thing that, like you said, it was like it was like found gold for Universal because they were like, okay, we've got Jurassic Park. I'm trying to think what their other one that they had was, but like the Minions cartoon movies, but they were looking for like another franchise, and suddenly here's the Fast and the Furious. It's just like, oh, that can make $1 billion. I who'd have thunk, and I think that also gave Vin Diesel, like you said, like he, kind of almost making his way into that Kevin Costner phase without the real big flops, I guess. And so maybe he needs to have his water world to kind of bring it back down to earth.
Well, I look forward to seeing his water world or his postman or what's the other one? There was another stinker. I can't remember.
Boy.
Anyway.
Yeah, he's definitely, it's funny because there's some there's the For the Love of the Game where he just kind of essentially on the screen is just making us all live out his like fantasy of being a baseball player. And I didn't realize that was directed by Sam Raimi, but it makes sense because the it's a Detroit Tigers player and he's from the Detroit area, so that's why he made that. But what was the golf one, Tin Cup, where he's like living out his dream to be a golfer? It's essentially that's what he's doing that with movies. It's what he would do for It's just like, oh, I wish I could be this, so I'm going to make a movie where I get to be this, and the rest of us have to indulge him for an hour and a half or 2 hours.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean that's it's amazing. Been getting away with it for quite so long.
Right, exactly. Well, yeah. Well, maybe this is a good place for us to leave this part of the conversation, and we'll take a break, and then when we come back, we will discuss Equalizer 2000. It's the early 90s in LA. The war on drugs is raging, and Detective John Bainbridge is the LAPD's secret weapon against crime. Former Special Forces in Nam, he's a cop on the edge. When he and his partner Geary uncover a potential human trafficking ring, it doesn't take long before John Bainbridge realizes this thing goes all the way to the top, which doesn't scare him. That just means they'll fall that much harder when he takes them down. Part send-up and part love letter to early 90s action films, Bainbridge will take you back to the golden days of Canon, PM Entertainment, and AIP. You can get it in paperback or on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited from Amazon. Follow the link in the podcast description. My newest novel, Don's House in the Mountains, is available now. It follows Don Veazey, who after 20 years has finally made it as a writer, going from an AP English teacher to richer and more famous than he ever could have imagined. In the process, his wife Lois, feeling alienated and resentful of her husband's success, has filed for divorce, forcing Don to move to a house in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. With time alone to reflect, he's able to see how his new wealth and fame has affected his life in ways he never expected. Maybe the biggest of these is his new house, which is bigger and nicer than anything he's ever had in his entire life, but the longer he lives there, the more he gets the sense that it might have magical powers. But that can't be right. A house can't have magical powers, can it? Pick up Don's House in the Mountains today. You can find it at Amazon in paperback and in Kindle. All right, we are back, and we're gonna get stuck in here on Equalizer 2000. So, I'll do a quick plot synopsis here. It's post-nuclear holocaust. But what did they say? 100 years after? Yeah. So 100 years after the nuclear holocaust, the only area that's even somewhat habitable, I guess, is northern Alaska, which is now a desert. There is a dictatorial military regime called is it the Operation? Is that
the ownership?
The ownership. Yeah, I probably should have written that one down. I thought there's no way I'm going to forget the ownership, and then I get on the podcast here and I forget that it's the ownership. But the ownership, they rule, and then there's like a group of like rebels that are looking to kind of take them out, and then Richard Norton, he's like one of the top soldiers for the ownership. And in a battle, this bad guy, Lawton, played by William Stice, he wants to take out Norton's dad, who is like a higher up, so he can sort of take his part within the hierarchy. Norton gets injured. He gets captured by the rebels. He escapes from them, but he wants revenge on this Lawton. And so that's when he comes across Corinne Wall, who, of course, you've got to always have the sexy woman in leather. Of course, you know, Norton is also the sexy guy in leather, I guess. So you've got, kind of, equal opportunity leather in this film. But she brings him back to her area where this guy named Dixon, who was a former soldier in the operation, served with Norton's father. He is sort of running his own. They're not really a rebel group, but they're kind of outside of the operation, or the ownership. I keep calling them the operation, the ownership. And he nurses Norton back to health, and Norton notices that one of them is building this really big gun that it's the Equalizer. It's the thing that can help them defeat the baddies. And so this big, massive gun, he uses it to take out a bunch of rebels. But it kind of goes through, kind of your classic Marx Brothers film, right? It is the package that goes through various hands. Sort of a ragtag group of petty criminals led by Robert Patrick. They get their hands on the gun, and then Lawton gets his hand on the gun, and so he takes over from the ownership, for power. And then it's up to Norton to sort of get all these rebels together and to get this gun back. And when he does, that's it. He's ready to defeat the ownership once and for all. So, Will, what did you think of Equalizer 2000?
Well, I really enjoyed this film, and the reason we were looking at it is because when we started batting around ideas for this, Furiosa was just coming out, or had just come out in cinemas, and I was saying to you, you know what, Matt, I really haven't seen as many of these like post-apocalyptic, post-nuke movies as a genre film watcher like myself should have seen. So this was a first time watch for me, and I really enjoyed this movie. It kind of had everything that I guess I wanted, or kind of thought you might, or thought you should get from a post nuke movie. So you get to see some people running around in American football shoulder pads, which seems to be the body armor du jour of the post-nuclear age. There are people pointlessly wearing crash helmets just to, I don't know, make themselves look different. I mean, the kind of fashion sense is it's great to see sort of what costume designers' ideas of a post-nuclear future look like. I mean, it's a combination of imagination, I guess, what they've got available in the dressing up box, and any kind of their own creativity. I mean, this is non-stop, pretty much unrelenting shooting and explosions in this film. The plot, there's quite a few holes in the plot, but there's too much going on really for you to kind of worry about that, or for you to be an impediment to it. And there was I really enjoyed it. There's some like wacky choices that are made in this film, which I think can be excused by the setting, because you get a kind of bizarre group of I mean, I don't know what you call them, a cross between Native Americans and Jawas. I mean, the hill people. I don't know what the inspiration was for them. You get some wacky plot elements in there. So overall a good time.
Yeah, because I agree with you completely. I mean, this is just a fun. I think I have this as maybe Richard Norton's best. It's up there as one of his best, especially with him as the star. And it's the kind of movie that, like you said, like there's nothing in it that's like so offensive or horrible, right? I mean, I guess the Native American depictions, I mean, that just kind of goes back to like old like Western tropes, and it's almost like Cirio H. Santiago working in these traditions. He's just throwing stuff in there that he's used to seeing that either the Italian directors did with the knockoffs, or what he would see at a Western. He's like, I'm just going to throw this in here. I'm just going to get a bunch of local Filipino extras. Vic Diaz is in there. I don't know if the leader was Joe Marie Avalana. I'm not sure if that
Okay.
was. that might have been because that's another big name, right? Is from this like I don't think that was him. I don't think that was the leader. I think but maybe I'm yeah, because you never know. Like with the name, like if they don't have their picture on IMDb, it's hard to know who's anybody, right? Like but because this was co-written by Joe Marie Avellana. Is it Avellana? I think I don't know if they pronounce the trill the double L as a Y sound in the Philippines. I don't know. I know they've got that influence from being a Spanish colony, but I'm not sure.
I can barely pronounce English, Matt. So yeah,
Right.
not the man to come to for Filipino pronunciations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, we don't know. Yeah.
Wasn't the
But
leader
yeah,
Vic Diaz though, not Joe Maria Avellano?
yeah. I mean, Vic Diaz, right? You've obviously, right, any amount of Cirio H. Santiago films, you've seen plenty of Vic Diaz, and he is, I would say, like, I mean, so I know Mike Monty is number one for actors on your list of
Yes.
being in, but Vic Diaz, he must be close, right? He must be up there.
You know what? I should probably go and have a look at his CV. I'm not sure I've actually counted um, the films that he's been in with an exploding helicopter, but he's definitely somebody I should have a quick run through of his filmography.
Yeah, 'cause I'm wondering, but because I wonder how many. 'Cause yeah, I think he does a fair amount of the like he plays the baddie in a lot of those Vietnam movies. Or like not even like the main baddie. A lot of times he'll play like sometimes he'll play the main baddie, sometimes he'll play like a second tier, like the penultimate baddie, I guess. I don't know if that's the word to think of
Mm.
it. Like, but so he's in a lot of. I mean, yeah, but a lot of Cirio H. Santiago, of course, a lot of blaxploitation films as well. Like he was, a lot of the Corman, movies that he did with Pam Grier in the '70s. Vic Diaz seems to show up quite a bit. He's definitely a mainstay. I think when I see one of these movies, it's like I want one of three names, right? I want Mike Monty, Vic Diaz, or Jim Gaines. I think, right? Is that
Yeah.
who directed Secret of King Mahi's Island? I think because the director dropped out. I don't know if that's the first or second Gary Daniels movie.
Yeah, I just had a quick look at Vic Diaz's CV and got about five. So yeah, respectable, but he's not. I would have thought if you'd asked me, I would have said that's he would have had more than that. But yeah, strangely, a bit of a low total,
Yeah.
or lower than I thought he might be.
Yeah, when looking at his CV, he doesn't do as many of those Vietnam movies as I thought. Like he does, something like he's in Strike Commando 2, but not the first Strike Commando. So it seems to be that's kind of his, he's yeah, I mean he does movies like he was in Live by the Fist, Caged Heat, right? Any kind of Caged Heat movie, right? You're not going to get any exploding helicopters in. I say you're not going to get any exploding helicopters, but I guess you can attest to this that you can find exploding helicopters in any kind of movie, really.
You certainly can. I mean, I think it's fair to say, yeah, kind of women in prison movie, probably really not going to get an exploding helicopter in that. But it's hey, if I've learned anything watching over 600 films with an exploding helicopter, is they can crop up anytime in the most unlikely of ways.
Right. Now, one interesting thing. So when I was on your podcast, I think the first time we talked about Codename Wild Geese, and that exploding helicopter sequence, right? It's like one of the I don't know, like the local, like I don't know if it was baddies or whatever it was. They like stab the helicopter with a machete, I think, right? And then like all this like purple
Yeah,
liquid comes out that's supposed to be gas. Um, I noticed here in this film because there's a sequence in this film where Corinne Wall is driving away with like containers of gas or gasoline on in the back of her car, and Robert Patrick's gang catches up in their car, and one of them slashes at one of them with a machete, and it looked like that same purple liquid was coming out of the container. I don't know if you caught that.
I didn't know, but well, yeah, but it sounds a bit like sounds a bit like methylated spirits in terms of its appearance.
Right? Yeah. So, yeah. I wonder if like again because Cody Geese, of course, it was Antonio Margarita, but it was shot in the Philippines. I wonder too if that's kind of where Cirio H. Santiago got some of his inspiration was from working with some of those Italian auteurs, if that's the right term for them, when they're making films in the Philippines.
Could well be, although he was so busy. I wonder he had time to take inspiration from anybody else. He was too busy shooting another movie.
Right, that's a good point too. I mean, yeah, I mean the amount of stuff that he does, Cirio H. Santiago. But again, it's kind of like now when you look at like say like a Fred Olen Ray, or David Dakota, right, where it's like, you know, whatever studio comes, like whether it's Hallmark with Christmas movies, or like, Concord, with Roger Corman, they're like, you just pump out a bunch of genre movies, and they can do it, right? They can do it quick and on the cheap, and it's almost like, Santiago works in that same vein where he knows all the shortcuts to make this movie fast and cheap, and you can pump out multiple ones at a time.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have to. I mean, it's easy to sort of knock and trash a guy like Santiago's career and his output, but um, you know, and I've seen quite a lot of his films, and some of them are very good, and some of them are pretty are very average. I don't think I've ever seen one. I probably have seen one that's terrible, but I mean, he knows what he's doing. I mean, he knows how to make a film. He knows how to kind of tell a story, to set things up, play things out. And there's a you got to salute his craftsmanship, and you got to salute the fact that he's not working with the biggest budgets. He's not working with the best actors. He's not working with, particularly good scripts. But, he's turning in pretty much every time a more than watchable film or a watchable film. And very often they are like, more often than not, they're very entertaining. And, you have to admire the craftsmanship and the ability, and as you say, working across all those different types of genres. I mean, I've got a lot of respect for those type of directors of just like, hey, right, you want me to make a comedy? Fine, here we go. You want me to make a drama? Okay, no problem. Rather than these people are kind of like, oh, I've been just stating this project for 15 years, and it's just I've been thinking about this. Just I got a lot of respect for the people who just, okay, right, got $100,000. I got 3 weeks to shoot this. I've got a quarry and some people who've never acted in film before. Go make a movie.
Right, right, and then it's just like, okay, well, what did we, what can we use from previous movies, right? Like what, okay, we still got the spiked cars, we still got the, like you said, the football helmets that are painted black, and the pads, and stuff. And I do wonder, like too, like with the Philippines, like, did they, was there an attempt? I don't know if there's an American football league in the Philippines. Like they could have drawn from. But like it seems like that, it's kind of like, when you've been on before, when we talked about Craig Fairbrass, right, where it's like, what is the baseball bat used for in England, right? Because there's no baseball being played. It's like, like, okay, well, what are we doing in the Philippines with American football equipment? Well, we're just using it in our movies because there's no, like there's no other use for it, right? Nobody's playing. Also, there is actually, well, the American Football League in the Philippines was organized in 2016. So there was, I guess, American football, but. So I guess they have played it. They did. So I guess there's a reason to have the equipment, but I guess, imagine, yeah, I would have to think, if I were to guess, that the companies like Concord New Horizon that were making movies in the Philippines probably contributed more to the American football equipment industry than an actual
Mm.
Philippine Football League.
Well, I was thinking that they're probably in the 1980s. There were probably sort of American equipment companies for American football who were like, geez, we're getting so many orders from the Philippines. American football must be huge out there. Little realizing of just going out to be used on a post-apocalyptic film set.
Right, exactly. I wonder, like Roger Corman, like he has like whatever a prop master or something who's making these orders, and yeah, and I wonder too, like. I don't know that Corman was like shady when it came to things, but I wonder if there's like a sense of like, yo, oh, we're starting this like football league in the Philippines and we need equipment. Can we get a discount? Can we get a deal? Oh, sure, absolutely, yeah, here you go. And then it's like, they're just using it for post-apocalyptic movies.
Well, I don't think he was shady like that, but I can imagine sort of a scenario where he was hired to make an advert in the Philippines to
Right.
promote a Philippines football league, and he just thought, right, I can, while we're out there, I can kind of use the downtime to shoot, a quick movie whilst we're out there. Otherwise, so I can see him being enterprising and in that particular way.
Yeah, or maybe even too, like there was an attempt at a Philippine football league that went defunct, and they're like, well, what are we gonna do with all this equipment? And Roger Corman shows them like, I can take it off your hands for you. Like, and then suddenly like, and then they have got some prop masters out there with some black spray paint and just go to work on it. It's a funny thing because it's like. I think part of it too with the American football outfits, right, is that with the pads and all of that stuff, is that because American football, especially in the 80s, really wasn't played anywhere outside of, the United States and Canada. It wasn't really kind of known. So it kind of had like I think it probably had like a more exotic quality to it, right? That would allow it to be used for things like this.
Yeah, and it's just what was it about 80s and American sports equipment? Because what was the I'm not a big horror fan, but what was the horror franchise with the hockey mask
Oh,
wearing
Jason, Friday the
Jason?
13th. Yeah.
So you just had you had hockey masks in the horror genre, and you had American football gear in the post-apocalyptic genre. Just the enterprising uses for American sports gear.
Yes.
Incredible.
And I think that one was inspired. There was a goalie, I think he played for the Bruins, my team that I grew up watching, who every time he wore like, because now they wear like these really sophisticated masks as the goalie, because they're taking hockey pucks off the face. Originally they didn't wear anything, right? They just, it's like, okay, these pucks are coming at you and that's it. But when that mask is in the Friday the 13th style, I guess every time he got hit in the face, he would draw like a scar on the mask. And so then the mask was just covered in these like scars, like kind of the stitch scar, with like kind of like the
Yeah.
almost like the train track scar. And so the whole mask was covered in that. And I think that was the inspiration for the Jason mask was seeing
Oh,
that.
okay.
Yeah. So I don't know if that was the goalie so much because in the 60s and 70s, hockey players didn't make a lot of money. And my dad, him and his father, they worked, construction, doing like brick masonry and that kind of thing. And I want to say I think he said when he was like in Vermont or something, it was either that goalie or another goalie who played for like, the Bruins or the Canadians or something like that, who was working with them because they had to make money in the off season. It's probably the same thing probably for football players in England, right? Is that they didn't make that much money. And so they had like other jobs and stuff probably before the money became bigger.
Yeah, that was certainly the case. Or they played other sports. I mean, there was footballers who then in the summer would play cricket because it was a way of making a bit more money. And obviously, didn't get professionalized sport until the 60s. So you had kind of bit like unions where people would sign for a team and then they'd be put on the payroll of some company where they were sort of notionally working, but not really.
No, that makes sense. That actually makes a lot of sense. That like, yeah, you would, because it was a completely different setup, and it's fascinating how the two how sports evolved in both countries. Because in the United States, you had like these competing leagues, whereas in England you had like the association, right, where all the teams fell under the association, or the football association, and so then
Mm.
from there, right, like you had like the tiers and the relegation and and all of that. And so then like, yeah, like they would be like clubs that, yeah, if you wanted, right, your player for your club, yeah, you kind of take him on, right, like you said, like having a job that was kind of a job but not a job, but the idea is really that you're playing football, was your job. So that's an interesting thing because, yeah, because in baseball in America, it was completely different. It was very, of course, in America, it's always like very like corporate capitalistic, kind of thing where they originally started out the same way as sporting clubs, and then they kind of just drew into like this league that was owned by, again, they wouldn't have been billionaires then; they would have been millionaires. But they were still like rich men who were exploiting the labor of the players.
Well, it's has it really changed, Matt?
Right now,
Has it really
exactly.
changed?
No, no. Right now, they're billionaires that are making lots of money. It's a fascinating thing between the two leagues. I know I'm kind of getting off on a sports tangent here, but it is with European sports where you have the relegation element of it. It kind of forces teams to try to be good. Whereas in America, because you don't have that relegation element, it's like and obviously there's a huge money in television, right? The same in England. You have owners that just cash the television money checks and just don't put any kind of relative representative team on the field. It's a fascinating thing that like you can just be a billionaire who's just making billions of dollars off a team and not really worrying about winning. Whereas in England, right, you'd drop like a stone for like down the lower levels, and suddenly you're playing in like these what would be minor league parks here in America, and you're not making that same kind of money. You kind of lose out on that money if you don't try to put a good team on the field.
Well, yeah. I mean, I sort of look at the structure of American sports, and I'm sometimes perplexed by a country that is, in some ways, sort of very ruthlessly, very ruthlessly capitalistic on the one hand, but then also has these strange egalitarian elements, like like the draft system, for instance, is a sort of leveler for for weaker teams, which just that like just would seem a complete nonsense in the UK. And yeah, sort of surprised that it continues to exist.
Well, it sounds like it, but actually, it's very much a very American because, yes, capitalism is supposed to rule, but actually, it's kind of more of a communist system in the sense that like
Well,
there
yeah,
is wealth.
exactly.
Yeah, there's wealth redistribution. It's just amongst billionaires. So the billionaires want to keep themselves hedged against not being billionaires, right? So they all want to have their billionaire teams. They also get handouts in the form of like cities and states paying to build new stadiums for them because they're like, well, if you don't build us a new stadium, we'll just move to another city that needs a team. So that's the other, right? Because in England, right, you can't do that. You can't just move to another city because that city already has teams, right? They just need to be promoted. But also the draft system is another way that subsidizes billionaires because right in Europe, for example, like if you're Man United and you want to build your player pool, right, you've got to go out to different parts of the world and bring young players to your academy and teach them how to play. So you've got to invest in the academy, invest in the players, and then you can loan them to lower clubs, right, to get their experience. Whereas in America, right, the NFL football teams, they just let the universities do it for them, so they don't have to pay at all for training their players. They just they let the universities do it, then they get to pick with their player, and yeah, the player has no say in where they go, right? They just so it's like an indentured servant system that works in their favor. Like now, the players get paid because they can do advertisements based off their image and likeness and all of that. But before they couldn't even do that. It was illegal as a college player to do any of that kind of thing. So yeah, so it's right. It sounds egalitarian. It's egalitarian in the sense of keeping billionaires rich. That's always kind of been the process in America. It's like yeah, the billionaires want to maintain their billionaire wealth. They don't want to lose it in some way.
Well, there's an old saying, I can't remember what exactly it is, but it's something along the lines of uh, you know, millionaires never got rich by spending their own money.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you see that here with I mean the NFL. Like one of the more fascinating things is again, you look at Europe, right? You look at England and or other leagues, and it's like so. For example, if you're a club in England, right, you've got to have the best of everything because if you don't, right, that player will want to go to maybe either another club in another European league or another club. It's like for example, if Man City doesn't have like the best training grounds for their and but the best of facilities, right, for the players, they're not going to want to play at Man City. They'll play somewhere else. Well, in America, you don't have any choice with the NFL because you've just got 32 teams and that's it. You can only choose between those 32 teams. So like they all have like like they kind of have varying degrees of like bad facilities. So the team that I follow, the Patriots, like they don't even pay for like childcare. So like the wives can watch the games. Like they can't watch. They can't just have like a babysitter. They won't pay for that kind of thing. They don't pay for meals. So like for example, if they practice on a Wednesday, there's certain days of the week where you don't get meals. You have to pay for your own meals. It's just a really fascinating thing that again, for billionaires, it's like, well, I can pay my son or daughter an extra $1 million if I don't add these facilities here.
Wow, I'm blown away.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. It's one of the more fascinating things in America, because talking about a movie Equalizer 2000 doesn't quite have it has kind of the baddies, but think about like James Bond movies where the baddies were always billionaires, right? They were always like rich people trying to ruin the world. I guess billionaires saw that as a bad thing, and now you've got like Elon Musk who has like this cadre of sycophants who like love him, and I'll even see in like Twitter posts where like they'll talk about baseball teams that the owners are like kind of just stripping them down and trying to move them to other cities. There'll always be people that defend them, that defend the billionaire owners. And so I wonder if they're trying to change their image without actually doing anything to change their image, right? Just like, no, us billionaires, we're great. You should keep giving us money. It's a great idea. But I guess we need more James Bond movies that have billionaires trying to ruin the world to get us back to that mindset of like, billionaires don't always do good things.
Well, let's get James Bond back on the screen. He's been gone too long already.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because they're trying to figure out who they want to be the next James Bond. And I know, you were on a previous episode where we talked about, two non-Bonds, right? We talked about, movies that had former James Bonds in them. But yeah, right. They're kind of trying to figure out who the next one is. But also, isn't James Bond entering the public domain?
I'm not entirely sure. I had heard something about that there was some copyright. I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been a recollection of reading some sort of Barbara Broccoli interview and talking about various things about the franchise and was talking about how they're sort of prepared for moving into a post copyright era, but I'm not a copyright legal expert, so I don't quite know what the various timelines are, time issues are, because it's all different. It's different for different things. I think literary copyright is 99 years. Like music copyright, I think was extended to. Used to be shorter, but it was extended to like 70. And yeah, I don't know, but I think the first James Bond novel came out in the early 50s, I think. So we're talking about so if there is, say, for instance, if there is a sort of 75, if it is a 75-year sort of, I don't know, if there is a 75-year time span on it, then maybe it could be coming out of copyright soon. But yeah, I can't speak with any great certainty on that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I think about obviously, Cirio H. Santiago is no longer with us, but thinking about like so I looked at the first Bond novel was 1952. It says here. So I wonder, like when when that starts to go out, like when because 52, so we're 72 years after the first one. So because obviously Cirio H. Santiago is no longer with us, but the idea of like Fred Olen Ray or David Dakota, or even just like kind of these cheap, unfortunately again we don't have Corman with us, so it would have been nice to have him produce some James Bond movies. Maybe Troma could do a James Bond movie when it that would be interesting.
I want to see that, but also I probably don't want to see that as well. I'm very split.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, because that's one genre that I think Italian directors did more, like kind of the fake James Bond movie. There was one that had Sean Connery's brother. I don't know if that was directed by an Italian director. 007, I think it was.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it certainly was an Italian production, so I'm guessing it must have been an Italian director. Yeah.
Yeah, Neil Connery.
It was called Operation Kid Brother. I think it was.
Right.
I think it probably has one of these films got a couple of different titles, but yeah, that's the one I know it as.
Yeah, and Alberto Di Martino, who's not an Italian director that I'm familiar with, but he's definitely an Italian director. So he was, is from Rome. So
I think he did one of those shark movies, Alberto Di Martino. But I mean, that doesn't narrow it down, does it?
No,
they all did one.
Right, yeah, exactly. It's funny with IMDb how IMDb lists actors or lists work for people where it's like they for Puma Man was one of the ones he did. So that was a big one
Oh,
for
classic.
yes,
Has an
that's a
exploding
classic.
helicopter in.
I was gonna say, I think you posted on that one before. So yeah, that's another area of movie, right? The superhero movie that uh, the Italian uh uh the Italian knockoff genre, they there's so many different areas that they got into that it's and again I think Cirio Santiago kind of works in that tradition. But yeah, it's kind of amazing. And I mean, you would never be able to watch it all. There's just so much stuff out there that it would take, you'd never, you could, even if you could find it all, you wouldn't be able to watch it all.
Well, I was just going to make that point myself, which is, yeah, the availability of some of that, those Italian knockoff cinemas is very difficult, and probably, in some ways, probably a lot of it possibly lost forever, just because it was seen as cheap, disposable, and not, once it'd been released in cinemas, well, what possible afterlife is there for this?
Yeah, that's a great point because it's kind of like, we think of like the very early history of cinema, right? Where, so many movies were lost because, obviously at that time, cinema was much more, it was that it didn't last as long, right? It was likely to die out, and you get these stories of like movies being found in like mental institutions that doctors showed films to the patients, and they find some buried away somewhere, something like that. But it's just the same, right? Where with these like you said with these Italian movies where maybe the film stock itself could last longer, but it was like there wasn't a sense of like VHS at that time. There wasn't a sense of a video market. I think that was one of the areas where Fred Williamson got on kind of early on, was he was doing these Italian movies and he would bring them to America and they wouldn't play anywhere. So it's like, okay, let's just put them in the video store. And then of course, Corman kind of gets into that as well. But yeah, it's like, someone like an Alberto Di Martini, it's like, unless something like a Puma Man gets featured on like Mystery Science Theater 3000, it's like, yeah, his movies are going to be lost.
Yeah, these, like tears in the rain, Matt.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one thing that's nice, I think, so you in the UK you don't have Tubi because that's where Equalizer 2000 was on. I think it's also on Amazon Prime though, I think, right? That's um
Well, Matt, breaking news. Tubi has very recently come to the UK, like in the last 2 weeks. It has
wow.
arrived in the UK. The selection on UK Tubi is not as extensive as the selection on the American service. So yes, it's but better to have it. I can still sort of fire up my VPN and get onto the all the goodies on the American service. But yeah, it is more convenient to be able to have the UK version, and there's certainly enough stuff there to keep me entertained, and plenty of post-apocalyptic films on there as well.
Yes, there's a ton of these, like whether they're the one directed by Cirio H. Santiago or some of the Italian ones. Yeah, Tubi is awash in them. And which is kind of a nice thing because they're hour and a half long. I mean, Tubi doesn't have a lot for commercials. I don't know with the VPN what kind of commercials you get because I think they're targeted to the local market. Like for example, I get online casino things because online casinos are legal in Pennsylvania. So if I wanted to, I can blow all of my money on slot machines while I'm in line at the pharmacy or the grocery store or something like that.
Attaboy.
Yes. Yeah. So I do now because I guess with the VPN, I guess it would depend on where the VPN is located in the United States, like what commercials you'd get. But
Yeah, I get some very weird. I get some very. I can't really. I'm not making a point of remembering them, but I kept getting served this advert for. Oh, sort of come to some. I can't remember what it was, like come to some place in America, and I was just absolutely sick to bloody death of seeing this advert every 15 minutes, especially because I was like, look, I'm not even in this country. It's just this isn't ever going to happen. But the with the it's quite interesting actually. I was with the UK Tubi. I don't know whether it's deliberate, but basically all the adverts at the moment are advertising Tubi content.
Mm.
So I don't know whether that's a deliberate strategy to kind of show you what else you could be watching on the platform to kind of get you bought in and invested in Tubi as a platform, or whether it's just because they are a new startup and don't have don't have contracts with advertisers yet. So I suspect it's more the former, because if you're launching a new app and a channel, you've easily got time ahead of launch to be kind of drumming up advertising revenue from people to kind of run little digital ads. So I suspect it's more about just trying to advertise Tubi to its users to kind of get you sold in. But at the moment, just being told about keep having to watch a 15-second promo for the Beguiled, the kind of the remake version, I think, of that. I'm sure I will shortly be sick to the back teeth of seeing that.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, because it's Tubi is co-owned by Fox, and so I don't know. So Rupert Murdoch, I guess, has a stake in it, and so like here in the United States, it's like, oh, Gordon Ramsay has a new like cooking competition show, right? So let's advertise that. So I don't know that might be something. I don't know. Murdoch, does he own Sky TV in in the UK?
I'm slightly hazy because he has sold off
Oh, right.
various things, and I think he has in the past sort of sold off say controlling interests in things. So I have to say I'm not fully abreast of like what he owns these days and what he doesn't anymore.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, it's funny. I guess with Gordon Ramsay, I don't know like what the opinion of him is in the UK, but it's funny here in America. It's really just about like, you know, him yelling at people, and telling them they're doing a bad job or something like that. But then like when you actually watch the shows, he's not so bad when it comes to that. It's almost like that's what they think for Americans, like that's what will get us in the door is just seeing, people from the UK yelling at people and telling them they're doing a bad job. That's what Americans want, which I guess to some extent maybe we do. We seem to like people yelling at other people. There was a
So you either want Hugh Grant being bumbling and fumbling,
right,
or you want a shouty Scotsman yelling abuse at you. So
right.
you don't want anything in between.
I don't think so. I think it's that's really yes. The BBC, like a lot of BBC procedural shows and things like that are popular in America. Like they kind of make their way here. Or there's like a masterpiece theater element. PBS where someone might want to watch a 9-part adaptation of Nicholas Nickleby or something like that. But for the most part, it's Americans enjoy seeing other people get yelled at. Is actually what it is. Like there was a TV or like a radio psychologist, Dr. Laura, who essentially her radio show is just berating callers. Like people would just call in and be like, "Oh, I think my husband's cheating on me," and she just would berate the woman and say like, "Yeah, it's your fault, or whatever, or you need to do or whatever." And I think people just enjoy hearing other people get yelled at and stuff like that, which it seems like a horrible thing. Like for me, it's like I get turned off by it. Like I can't deal with it. So Gordon Ramsay, I think with his show, he would yell at people, but then he would also be really nice to them. Like he was, because he wanted them to be good chefs. That's really the idea. Is he just wanted to, have them be good. And but it's Americans seem to like that. I don't know what it is, and
Well,
and I
I mean,
think
if Americans like that, why did you elect Ronald Reagan as your president and not Ali Ermey? If shouting at people is what you really like.
because Reagan did some shouting as well. He was, I mean, his very famous line is telling Gorbachev to take down this wall, right, in the Berlin Wall. And I so when I studied political science in school, I discovered that because Reagan gets credited in America with like ending or the Cold War, or like that that like the fall of the USSR actually happened under his watch, and it was because of him like agitating against the Soviet Union. But actually, it's when political scientists went into the aftermath of the Soviet Union, they discovered that actually Reagan prolonged the Soviet Union because they were ready to you know close up shop in the early 80s, and then here's Reagan like agitating against them. Then the hardliners within the regime became more of a they actually had more power and more sway, because it was like, we can't let this Reagan guy
Mm.
and so he actually prolonged it. So but yeah, he was very like, he was very angry and yelling and stuff like that. I can't there's other things that he would there's like there's some footage of him yelling in media, like uh, uh speeches and things like that. So yeah, he wasn't always the nicest guy. And I guess towards the end with the Alzheimer's, he probably was just like yelling about all kinds of random stuff too.
Okay.
So,
Al Pacino for president. Is that what we're in for next?
yeah, I think Al Pacino would make a great president. So yeah, I guess with Trump, right? Like he just does these speeches where he's just yelling about random stuff, and like he's like like there's a reporter and he's like, get that guy out of here, get this whatever. Like it's like
Yep.
like yeah, there's a segment of the American population that just loves people yelling at people. It's Morton Downey Jr. As a talk show host, like they just love that kind of thing. And so yeah, Al Pacino, he I guess now he's a little advanced age, though with the current presidential climate, I guess he's right in the
Still a
prime of his
youngster.
right. Exactly. So I mean, yeah, just seeing him doing speeches, yelling and stuff like that, I think he could pull a pretty good percentage of the population.
Wow. Al in 2028, then I
Right.
guess.
Yeah, it's just just yelling and speed. And I think yeah, what was yeah, like Heat. If he just like yelled out like Heat quotes and Scent of a Woman quotes. I mean, look at like right. He does all these.
No
For,
manifesto, just yelling his most famous. I've got to do some Scarface lines there as
right,
well.
exactly. Exactly. Scarface would get him because you think about like he's fantastic in the Godfather movies, right? He's fantastic in Scarface and all these other movies. But the one that he wins the Oscar for is Scent of the Woman, where he's just yelling out "hooah" all the time, and it's like, there you go, there's your Oscar, Al Pacino. So I guess yeah, it's even when it comes to acting, right? It's like just yelling is going to get you there.
It's the secret. Don't tell everyone.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I guess kind of bringing it back to our Equalizer 2000 movie.
Is that what we were talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's funny. Yes. It's funny with this movie. This is when this posts in a couple of weeks. We'll be a little bit past it, but the reason when I posted was Mitch from the Video Vacuum Zone. We were talking about Wanted Man, and we got off on all kinds of tangents. And Scott Murphy from All 90s Action, like he quote tweeted my post, on the movie, and he was like, yeah, if you want to hear conversations about streaming and baseball and 90s comic book movies and also Wanted Man, check out this podcast. So I think Scott had said that like I'm like the one host that will just let people go off on tangent. I'm the worst at that. A lot of times the guest is the one who has to rein me in, to be like, hey, weren't we talking about a movie here? And I was like, that's right, we were, I guess, at some point here. So yeah, I mean, with Equalizer 2000, I mean, we've kind of talked about it, but this is just a nice old classic fun movie that it kind of just hits all the spots you want from one of these.
Yeah, I as I say, I really had a good time with this movie, and you can see the Mad Max influence on this film is very apparent in the tricked out cars that you get within this film. I guess you could also say that the ownership is a kind of evil version of the petrol town that you see in Mad Max 2. And I thought the car chase within this film was also very inspired by George Miller's film, with the kind of the use of like cameras sort of very low down near to the tarmac, and kind of like close to the kind of the sides of the car, that kind of sort of nose on the tarmac style of shooting. And what I really enjoyed about this film, the other thing I really enjoyed about this film was the quirks that Santiago kind of puts into this film. So we get the, as I say, we get the, the kind of, I mean, I kind of say Native American, but it's really for lack of a better analogy. I mean, they've got bows and arrows and they're wearing brown jerkins. I mean, I don't think I don't think they're meant to be Native Americans, but it's just sort of the reference point that my mind immediately went to. Yeah, I enjoyed the kind of like those sort of random elements shoved into the film, and yeah, I also enjoyed talking of random elements. I also enjoyed the sort of the whole premise really of this film is that, well, I don't know if it's the whole premise, but it becomes the dominating premise is the Equalizer gun and its ability to sway the entire future of this pocket of humanity in North Alaska. And it's not really clear that this gun really should be quite as have such power, because I mean, it's not like anybody else doesn't have a gun, and it only takes one bullet to hit Richard Norton or whoever's holding the gun at that particular time, and suddenly that person is dead. It's not like it makes them invincible, and I'm not sure it has such greater firepower than any of the other sort of weapons that people are toting around. So, but that's just you're in this world, and you kind of just you go along with the tide, I guess, is the sort of the way in which you best approach these films. And yeah, so I enjoyed these quirks that the film kind of introduces and requires you to go along with.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's Cirio H. Santiago, like we talked about him, he's a professional director, and he like you said, he's able to sort of co-opt some of George Miller's some of his uh quirks from the or some of his techniques from the Mad Max movies. Like you said, with the Native American characters, it's almost like he's pulling in Western themes, and there's also some like kind of spaghetti Western style shooting that he does, with like the close-ups on Richard Norton in certain sequences. So he pulls all of these little elements and he brings them all together in this very professional, well shot way that I think with all the other elements that we think of as the kind of the crass, right? That like you said, like the gun that, like, is it that difficult to get from behind, get somebody behind Norton and shoot him in the back of the head? Apparently, with this gun, right, it can be difficult. The spiked cars, all of that kind of thing. It's easy to get caught up on those crass elements, which are there that just kind of add to the fun of it. But I think, when you get down to it, I think this is one of those things that, like, the thing that I think keeps a movie like this from being like a samurai cop, right, or something like that, is that it is competently shot. Like that, Cirio H. Santiago is a professional director, and then you've got people like Norton that just turn in really solid performances. That just Robert Patrick, I mean, as like a kind of bumble, kind of like a goofy like Southern character that he's in this, yeah. And so. All those little touches, like you said, they all kind of come together and make something it's a lot of fun to watch. That even if there's holes in the plot, that you're kind of like, does that make sense? You can forgive them when everything else is so fun.
Absolutely, because he keeps things moving, and they he throws in enough incident in terms of like action, or he throws in a scene that's a bit quirky to just continually just keep the action moving, or to continually pique your interest as a viewer. And I would agree. I think this is a really well shot movie. I don't think Cirio H. Santiago is a great stylist of a movie director, but what I mean by well shot movies, he kind of knows how to begin a scene, get what he needs out of the scene, and how to end a scene. And it kind of pushes things along. Now there are like there's perhaps some continuity errors and things in here, but this is low budget filmmaking, so I can kind of forgive elements like that. And I think I say this film looks very good. I think the use of locations in this film is really good. I mean, there are a number of different environments that we see within this film. There's a sort of like deserty bit. There's the kind of like mountain bit. There's another bit which is I don't know, looks different again. It's a bit sort of a bit sort of a, it looks like there's a bit of vegetation there. I mean, but there's kind of the use of those different environments, like just adds a bit of, helps build the world of this movie, helps kind of create this idea that you have different groups living, or kind of like living in identifiably different areas, and as we see in the film, they come together to clash against one another. And so I think that's, you have to, somebody, that's part of what, so when I say this is a well shot movie, it's Santiago looking, okay, let's all, we've got these locations we could use, let's harness them in this particular way to help accentuate the story that we're telling. And that's, sign of good movie making.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things that I think, looking at sort of the modern DTV world where, and I'm not saying the directors are bad in the modern DTV world, because you do have, ones like Fred Olen Ray, or David Dakota, who are kind of in this tradition of movie making. But I think these, like Cirio H Santiago, or like the Italian ones like Margheriti or Enzo Castellari, it feels like they came from a tradition, and I don't know, if Santiago learned from some of these Italian directors when he was making movies, but they come from a tradition of, like, it's almost like the same tradition that Fellini comes from, right? Or that Rossellini comes from. It's just making different movies. But there's a sense of like wanting to have, certain shots, or have things look a certain way. I think with the modern movie, I think there's almost like a more of a emphasis on like the line producer and getting everything done and in the can. And the director has to find their moments to make it inspired. Whereas I think, with the Corman films, or these Italian movies, the director had more control to as long as they were getting things under budget and they were making it happen. But there wasn't like this sort of line producer or distributor saying this is what the movie's got to be. It was, this is what I'm looking for. Cirio said, Santiago, I need a post-apocalyptic movie with Richard Norton or whatever. What can you give me? With him having that ability to kind of make it the movie he wants inside the budget, we get something that's a little bit more inspired than some of these modern, like almost like assembly line produced movies that we get.
I completely agree, and I wish I sort of understood more about the film business to really understand what has gone wrong, I would say, with this sort of low budget filmmaking, because like, just, I watch some of the stuff that comes out now, or I see some of the stuff that comes out now, and it's just like, did anyone, you watch it and you just like, did anyone care one iota about the film they were making here? Like, the acting is terrible, the script is terrible, the directing is terrible, and it's just like, what, there just seems absolutely no ambition behind the project whatsoever. And you, some of these Corman films or whatever are some of them are absolutely terrible. Some of them are terrible, but there's still things about them that are good. There's still some, young actor who is trying to use this as a moment to, start their career. Or there's a director who is, there's a director who's kind of like bringing some creativity to something that is, some very ordinary material, in order to kind of, okay, I'm going to show you what I can do because I want to, move on to something better. And you watch some of the absolute cack that comes out these days, and you just sort of like wonder, well, what are the aspirations of anyone working in this? Like, I something, I don't know whether it is because there's, the budgets at this sort of level of, the budgets in low budget filmmaking are even smaller now, or I really don't know. I really don't know what it is. I think somebody better, more plugged into the business could maybe, explain it to me. But yeah, I find the low budget filmmaking at the moment, there's certainly a strand of it really, really depressing.
Yeah, it's, I've noticed, because Ty from Quote said, he's on once a month. We kind of do some of these more modern ones, and we're doing it kind of more from the mindset of like these big actors like John Malkovich, or somebody is like almost slumming in the DTV world, and that's kind of more where the element comes from. But it's like, you watch the movie and there's like 8 production animations to start the film. So it's not like, with these movies where it's like you get Conquer New Horizons, or you get, you know PM Entertainment or whatever, it's just like the opener and that's it. And then you're just going into the movie. You get like 8 of these things. It seems like the budget is completely focused on names. So it's like we're going to put all of our money into getting Bruce Willis and some, teen actor from the early 2000s who's now, a little bit more weathered with gray in his beard. And we'll get him and, whatever other actresses whatever. That's where the money goes. And then it's like, just get this thing in the can as fast as possible. Don't worry about anything else. And I think from the director's standpoint, I think it's probably part of the reason why like a Keone Waxman got tired of it. He's just working with Seagal, and it's like, let's just pump out another movie so we get him another $1 million. And there's some other young directors I've seen, like there's one, James Cullen Brezak, who I think he could be in the Cirio H Santiago vein. Like he started out doing more independent stuff, but it's like, he's got to make money. And so he gets signed on to these movies where it's like, yeah, you don't have a lot of budget. I'll see like an inspired shot here or there in his movie and be like, okay, this is him trying to like put his stamp on the movie. But for the most part, he's just, he's just got to get this thing in the can, and he can't really do what a Cirio H Santiago has the freedom to do in 1988 or 1987 or whatever this movie came out.
Yeah, and I think there's, I think there's even I forget the guy who's behind a lot of those films. Who's
Randall Emmett.
Randy, yeah, that's it. And but there's even a sort of a tier of low budget filmmaking that is below that, which is so I've watched some of them because they've got exploding helicopters in, but I mean, in some ways, an example of that, I think you've watched it because I'm pretty sure you've reviewed it on one of your previous podcasts. Is like I think it's like Top Gunner.
Oh yes, yeah.
Which has a bunch of people in that. So you've got Eric Roberts as the name. You've then got like a bunch of people who've never acted in anything before. From what I understand, that a lot of the people working on that film were working on it for free because they wanted to kind of, get a credit to their name to be able to sort of say something. And it's just, it's an awful film. And you just like, okay, what was the ambition? What was the hope for this? Like, I can't think, the poor sod who was directing it really, like, or the people who are making it, like, what were they, they were obviously just making it really to just, cash a check. And, I've got no problem with people making money here, but like, geez, I mean, it's like, it was just, I mean, it's just so bad, and I can't, like, I just feel like the sort of low budget filmmaking is just getting worse these days.
Yeah, well, because that was an Asylum movie, and right in the Asylum, it's like, oh, let's just, again, there's like almost like a cynicism with the Asylum, and they try to act like there isn't a cynicism, like they almost act like, oh, we're in on the joke with like the Sharknado stuff like that, but no, when you watch a Top Gun, it really is just that. It's just, okay, Tom Cruise is putting out a new Top Gun movie. We're going to put out this Top Gunner thing and see how many people watch it because they think it's, ridiculous that this thing exists. And then, of course, Top Gun Maverick gets delayed, so now we've got to make another Top Gunner movie. And that's just kind of what they do. And, I mean, even with the Sharknado movies, there's a point where those got, it's just like, we're just throwing as much crap in these as possible. And, as many names as possible, whatever. And that's going to be, what done. And I guess like, in your case, you probably had to watch them because they had exploding helicopters. I would watch them because, one of them had Dolphin for like 5 minutes, or not even 5 minutes at the very end of the movie. So I was like, oh, I got to watch Dolph, or Lorenzo Lamas was in one. But there, like I'm sure there's a sense of cynicism. Like when you hear, Roger Corman talk about making movies where he's like, well, I told everybody that you can't make a movie more than 88 minutes because if it's after 88, that's another can of film, right? You can do it 88, you can do in 11 reels, whereas 90 minute is 12 reels, and we don't want to go to 12 reels. And so that kind of stuff, it sounds crass, but with the kind of things that we get, like an Equalizer 2000, like I don't even know if you'd get an Equalizer 2000 today. I think I don't know that if like the 8 production film funding companies that wanted to put together an Equalizer 2000 would give you something this good. And I also don't know where the directors are coming from that are learning along the lines of like a Cirio H Santiago. Like for example, Albert Pyun, he comes up in this world, right, where he's, like that's one of his early roles was to cut trailers for Cirio H, Santiago. I think he worked with Kurosawa. So, he comes from that tradition. Also, from low budget movies, stuff like that. And he kind of gets squeezed out. Like he just, there's a point where he just starts making his own movies, outside of the traditional distribution system, because they he made, like, it was a Tales of the Ancient Empire movie that he made that Lionsgate just took from him and completely changed it, and it wasn't the movie that he wanted to make. And so I think it's hard to be an Albert Pyun nowadays. It's hard to make the kind of movies that you want to make because there's like that cynicism of trying to pump it out and just get it on a streaming site and make it as like sanitized, I guess, as possible.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I just don't understand the economics of the business to really understand sort of what has changed, which means that sort of I guess sort of low budget filmmaking just doesn't or the kind of quality of it seems to have just fallen off a cliff. I guess it's because something like a Corman was making or producing these type of films. They could, they could be, making them at a low budget, and they were getting released theatrically. And so, they could make their money back, and you never know, you might have a hit, and it might make, 3, 4, 5 times back its budget, which would, which would make it a bit of a hit. Whereas like today, you're like how it, you don't, those kinds of low budget films would never be released theatrically, so they're really only ever going to go to streaming. And it's unlikely people are going to be renting them, so then there then becomes like a ceiling on like how much money that those films can ever really make, because they're only ever going to be like sold probably as a job lot to one of the streamers to be able to kind of we'll stream that for for 6 months or whatever. And so like what is the what I guess that takes away the ambition of, because you're never really going to make a financial hit, are you? You're just really going to be able to, okay, we'll shoot it for $250,000, we'll be able to flog it for to a distributor for 350,000, and we make $100,000 on it, and that's so we only need to make it good enough that it'll be picked up by a streamer. We don't need to make it any better than that.
Right. And that's where the names come in, right? Like, okay, if we can get Bruce Willis, that's Bruce Willis's face on the thumbnail, because I don't want to say the tin anymore, right? Because there's no physical copy. So it's like, Bruce Willis's face on the thumbnail, or any stars, right? That you can, any recognizable names. I mean, Dolph is enough of a name, or Jean-Claude Van Damme, or Seagal. Just put their face on there, and that's going to make somebody open it up and see what's going on with that film, more than like, like an Equalizer 2000. I guess it has a little bit of a credibility of like, somebody wanting to find these post-apocalyptic movies can go into Tubi and pull those that way. But a new movie's not going to really do that if it doesn't have a name attached to it. And so, it's like you said, it's a cynical way to look at it. I mean, I was always wondering too, like even from like a Disney Plus standpoint, that like if they made direct to streaming movies, like a direct to streaming Punisher that had Thomas Jane, like what is the number that makes that worth it for them, right? Like, so if the movie costs 20 million, do they make that back in new subscribers or keeping subscribers? Like, what is the financial calculus for even for them to want to make a movie like that? And I can't imagine that it's worth it, right? And so then we'll never get a Thomas Jane Punisher from Disney Plus, right? Because it's like it wouldn't be worth it.
Yeah, I think that is definitely, I suspect that's part of the picture, which is just kind of put the kibosh on a certain strata of low budget filmmaking, because exactly, that's the economic reality of like the world in which people are trying to make films. And it's just, how do you judge if something is worth how do you judge if a $20 million straight to streaming Punisher sequel is worth making it? I mean, how do you know if it's made its money back, if it's actually added value to Disney Plus's catalog? I'm sure I'm sure they've got a way of looking at that. I'm sure they've got a way of making those decisions, but judging by what is getting released at the moment, I mean, I don't feel like we're living in a golden era. So I kind of feels like something has been lost here. I mean, I don't know what you think. I actually, you know what, kind of getting to the point with it all, where I just think, you know what, if nobody ever made another film, I'd be good with that. Like, there's enough films out there for me to watch already. Like, we don't need any more. This is my
Yeah,
plea, Matt. Stop making films.
right. Because I kind of so it's interesting because I was thinking about this for myself when it came to just like when I used to collect different things, like whether it was movies or music or something like that. And one of the things I realized with music was that like I stopped buying CDs not just because there was streaming available, right? And it's like, okay, well, if I want, one Human League song, I don't need to go out and buy Human League's greatest hits, right? I can just listen to the one Human League song I want or whatever, like if I've got a hankering for a song from the 80s, there's that part of it. But the other thing I realized is that like nobody was putting out music that I wanted to buy. Like there wasn't anything new, and I had bought enough of what I needed, that I didn't need anything new. And you could make a point about that with movies as well, that like like how many movies come out that like do you could make the case like, do you need Furiosa, a Mad Max saga? Like how much do we need that movie when we've got Equalizer 2000? And I'm excited to see Wolverine versus Deadpool. I'm going to probably see that movie at some point, but it's like, yeah, I mean, how many movies do you're right. I mean, I do think of like, we have like Tom Jolliffe, who's a screenwriter on here, who's kind of making his own independent films, and is person he works with, Nathan Shepka, same thing. Like some of those independent films, I like the idea of them. I think I would like more of them making movies, but I don't need more Asylum movies. I don't think. I think to your point there, I don't need more of those. I don't need more. I don't know if it's not Randall Emmett or whoever it is. I don't need more of these like mass-produced, eight production companies in the beginning movies anymore. For sure. I don't. I would be happy if they all kind of folded up their tents and went away.
Well, I'm sorry to your friend Tom, but he needs to go and find another line of work, Matt, because I am shutting down the entire movie making industry.
Yeah.
If I have anything to do with it.
Yeah. I mean, now that you've got Tubi in the UK, of course, like you said, you were able to access it with a VPN before. I mean, Tubi tells you just how immense the film, like if you just click on a genre, like I clicked on art house films, and it was interesting because like Pam Grier blaxploitation films were included in the art house. So what they included was interesting what they were including as art house films
Alongside the Fellini.
Exactly.
Alongside the Bergman and the Tarkovsky.
Right. Like I think
the
like
Pam Grier.
right. Like I think like the Bicycle Thieves was like next to like Coffee. Like yeah, like if it gives you an idea. Like
makes sense. Alphabetical.
Right, exactly. I think that it was like that kind of idea. But just looking at what they have for where I'm like looking at, I was like, oh, like what like I haven't seen, the life and times of Colonel Blimp, right? The Pressburger film.
Yep.
I've always meant to see it. Never seen it's on Tubi. It's like just with Tubi alone. And I think Mitch from the Video Vacuum actually did this where he spent a year just watching Tubi movies. He didn't do anything else. He didn't go to any other streamers or anything. He wanted to see if he could do it. And yeah, he watched like a movie a day. He averaged a movie a day on Tubi, and didn't even come close to exhausting his, the supply of films on there. So it does give you that sense, and I guess like there's that crass mentality of, well, what out of all these movies, what's going to get streamed? Oh, well, it's the movie with Bruce Willis on the cover is more likely to get streamed than the one that has nobody on the cover, nobody that anybody recognizes, and like you said, like it's such a crass way to approach movie making that like, Equalizer 2000, yes, they get a name like Richard Norton. I mean, what Corinne Wall, I guess, would have been a name to some extent as well, but Robert Patrick was new. This was his second movie. So it's not really about names. It's about like just having a concept, putting it on the screen and seeing if people rent it in the or go see it in the theater and tell their friends about it and have fun with it. And it's like, how many of these can we get to make our money back? And yeah, we're definitely missing something when we don't have that anymore.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing is, people were making decisions on box art, weren't they? I mean, it wasn't they didn't need a thumbnail of Bruce Willis. They just needed an exciting image of Richard Norton holding a massive gun.
Right.
That's all they needed to kind of pick that off of the shelf.
Yeah. I think it still holds that, you go. I mean, I don't know what kind of streams this gets on Tubi, but I think I'd be curious to know, like, do these movies do better? Because I think, again, I think people, watch when you watch one of these, you watch like five of them sometimes. Like, you just go through it, it's like, oh, I'm on a post-apocalyptic kick, and I think it's the one thing, I guess, with Tubi, right, is that you can get into like the newer, more cynical movies, but there's also so many of these older movies on there that you can have fun with. That it's always a nice thing. But I think an Equalizer 2000, as we're kind of wrapping the conversation here, that what's nice about it is that you can kind of go back to watch this. So whether you're sort of disillusioned by the current state of direct to video, you can always go back to a Cirio H Santiago classic like this, and sort of cleanse the palate if you need to.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, just I think you're probably worried for me now, Matt, as after my bleak description of our movie making present and future. But yeah, don't worry. I take refuge in the past.
Well, right. Well, because, yeah, I mean, in your case, right, with the exploding helicopter quest, right, where it's like and I guess it's in the same way for me with direct to video, with like, with names like a Dolph Lundgren, or somebody like that. We're kind of forced to watch these newer movies when we don't necessarily want to, because this whole thing where, like, whether it's you look doing, trying to see as many movies with exploding helicopters as you can, or me, like, trying to get all these names like Dolph Lundgren, or even like a Scott Adkins now, right? Like, his movies aren't always, they're not all Avengements, right, with Scott Adkins. And I think it's like one of those things where, like, there's the quest part of it that kind of forces us to stay in the modern stuff. But there's some of these old ones that, like, you kind of always, I think maybe this movie's a good reminder too, that, like, yeah, as we're stuck in on these quests to kind of complete these different projects, sometimes it's good to go back to these old ones here and just sort of, like I said, I don't know if cleanse the palate's the right term, or even just sort of reset our brains a little bit.
No, I definitely agree. As a hardened and very voracious movie consumer, and as you say, like, following these various quests, you do, like, I have moments where I'm just like, oh, like, really just sick of it all. And yeah, when you come across something like a Equalizer 2000, you just, it cleanses the palate. It kind of recharges the batteries, and it kind of does give you gives you kind of the impetus to to carry on. And like, I remember, like, a little while back, again, I was kind of going through a phase where I was just like watching some real crud, and I felt very, dispirited. And fortunately, All the President's Men was on television, and I ended up watching that, and I was just like, good filmmaking, good acting, good writing, good direction. This is now I remember why I watch films.
Right, exactly. Yeah, sometimes you need that, right? Because as film lovers, right, you sometimes you watch, like it's like, yeah, like, I watch a movie that's got like Dolph Lundgren in it for 5 minutes, and the rest of the film, I'm just like, where did they come up with this plot? Where did they come up with this idea? I'm just reviewing this so I can get another Dolph movie on the site, but do I, and like you said, like, I think sometimes you got to find, like, like I said, in All the President's Men or something like that, to just be like, like, I found out that Network is finally on HBO Max, and I've got to just sit myself down and watch that one. It's one of the greats that I've never seen before, and I just need to, now, maybe this conversation makes it more important that I do it, that I get, just get that one in there, like you said, to kind of reset my brain.
Well, Matt, you know what I think about the world of low budget filmmaking at the moment? I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, it's a perfect place for us to leave this on here. So, Will, as we're wrapping up, anything you'd like to plug?
Well, I would very happily plug my own website and podcast project, which is Exploding Helicopter. So you can find the website at explodinghelicopter.com, or you can find the podcast, which is cryptically titled Exploding Helicopter, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you enjoy listening to Matt, he's been on my show many times discussing a variety of different films. Most recently, fantastic film, which I would... Yeah, if you're feeling jaded about the films that you're watching at the moment, then the film we reviewed on our last episode would be a great tonic, a great pick-me-up. It's Chuck Steele, Night of the Trampires. I mean, if you can't enjoy watching that, then you should probably stop watching films and find some other way of occupying your spare time. You can follow my social medias. I am on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Just search for Exploding Helicopter, you'll find us.
Yeah, and I think I'll have the link to the to your site, at least in the podcast description. So if that they go there and they can get the links. But yeah, Twitter Chopper Fireball. When I post this episode on social, you'll see that there. And one of the things I love about your Twitter is the short little clips of exploding helicopters that you post. They're always think of like the palate cleansers. I mean, they're always fun, to see, like, okay, for example, talking about football, right? I guess another way that football equipment is used is to blow up helicopters, because a couple of times we've used in American football to blow up a helicopter.
They certainly have. Be open to a third one. So yeah.
Exactly. Perfect. Well, it's a good place for us to end it. So thank you again, Will, for coming on. It was another great conversation, and thank you everybody for listening. And we'll be back soon. Bye, everyone.
Director